on average, just in the United States, about 220 people die every single day from an opiate overdose. And by the time we finish this show, 8 to 10 people are going to die from an opiate overdose. If we get even one person, one viewer with this program that we might be able to help with some of the information that's shared on here, then it's all worth it.
Gotta leave left, take a break, breathe. 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 Cause I don't wanna go, but I don't wanna stay. Don't know what to do, can't make up my mind. Cause I don't wanna go. Don't know what to do. Think we need a breather. Yeah, I think we need a breather.
Yeah, we need a breather. Hey, everyone. Peace. It's your old pal, Glenn Victor. Welcome to episode 51 of the Dare Me podcast. Coming to you live right now from Sacramento, California. Hey, thanks for the applause there from my old pal, Dean Baker. Why don't we bring him on right now? He is live in Orlando, Florida, our co-host and producer. There he is. How you holding it down in Orlando, Dean?
Doing well.
Yeah, man.
Sure.
Can you believe we are on episode 51? It just doesn't seem possible. Does it seem that long to you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Dealing with your crazy ass, Glenn. Yeah, it seems like it. But yeah, man, we made a commitment when we started this podcast that we would do one full year. I did a lot of promotion and videos and reels leading up to this podcast, and I kept saying over and over, you know, if I'm going to do this thing, man, I'm going to commit to doing it for one full year, or what's the point? And here we are, just one episode away now after today from fulfilling that commitment, man. I'm really kind of proud of us, you know, that we did this, man, and made that commitment and stuck to it. And just one more episode to go, and we'll have fulfilled that commitment we made of doing the Dare Me podcast every single Sunday for one full year. Now, granted, we did replay a couple of editions of the show for various reasons, like when the Super Bowl was on and had a power outage and some shit like that. But we were here every single Sunday, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time, and one more episode to go. And as you know, Dean, and we mentioned it briefly last week, we will do episode 52 next week, Sunday, live from Honolulu, Hawaii. Yeah, your old pal Glenn Victor will be broadcasting live from Honolulu. Dean, of course, will be there holding it down in Orlando, Florida, and I will be visiting my son, Glenn Jr., who's been a guest on this podcast many times. We call him G. Money's his nickname. He lives in Hawaii now. He's been living there for a couple of months. And what a great way to bring this thing full circle. Celebrate our next weekend is really going to be a cool weekend, Dean, in a lot of ways. Such a transitional weekend. We will reach the one full year mark of this podcast when we do, in fact, then after that, take a breather, like we just kind of put out there in that reel we played, to open the show, which, by the way, shout out to my friend AWOL Artist, a guy I met at that Future of Artists Music Summit, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit. who just released that tune about a week ago called Breather. And I thought, man, what a perfect song to use for a promo reel for this podcast, because we are about to take a breather after next week. More on that in a little bit, and we'll talk about Dare Me Podcast 2.0 coming up a little bit down the road. But yeah, next week, very transitional weekend. We'll bring Dare Me 1.0 to a close. 52 weeks in a row of this podcast. And also, your old pal Glenn Victor, will be celebrating not one, not two, but 3 years clean. Yes, y'all, 3 years clean and sober. Thank you, Dean. Like we say, I say it for the cause, not necessarily for the applause, but I do appreciate the applause because, oh man, have I worked hard to get to this point. Living clean and sober, opiate free, drug free, alcohol free, whatever the fuck, I'm just so grateful. Oh my God, so grateful. And on that note, let's talk about it a little bit. That's what this podcast has been all about, y'all, is me just putting myself out there that, yeah, man, I am recovering from a horrible, horrible addiction that I developed to opioid pain medication. Now, I've had a long history with addiction, and if you're a regular viewer or listener to this podcast, you already know, because I've told my story on here many, 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 many times. 50 times I've at least touched on it, because I do. Every episode of this podcast, I talk about my history with addiction, at least a little bit on the front end. And I've gone into great detail about it many times. I've struggled with this shit since I was a kid. Like most kids my age back in them days, man, I started partying as a young kid, 10, 11, 12 years old, drinking, smoking weed. Then we started doing all the other shit that came our way. Coke hit in the 80s. Oh, man, I got caught up in that madness. And then I got clean. I got clean at just shy of 25 years old, stayed clean and very actively involved in 12-step groups and recovery, and stayed clean for almost 17 years. Had a horrible relapse, lasted over 5 years, went back to the bottle. Oh, my God, what a horrible, sloppy-ass drug that is. Thank God I don't fuck with that one anymore. Then I stayed clean. Again, I ended up back in a rehab center in treatment. That was a good trip for me, man. I stayed clean for over 6 years. Then I broke my damn ankle at an NA roller skating party, of all things. Had no business out there, as I often say, with my old ass. But I used to skate, man. I played hockey. I was into the whole roller disco thing. They had this NA roller skating party. It was like an adult night on Sunday. And I did great, man. I skated great. It all came back to me. All I had to do was step off that rink at the end of the night, and you go from that smooth, slick, fast surface to carpeting. And I lost my balance, man. My whole body was literally up in the air, and I came down hard on that ankle. And as soon as I did, I knew exactly what happened. I could hear it. Broke my damn ankle, man. And the next morning I was in surgery. They put 3 pins in, and as I often say, man, tossed me a bottle of Vicodins on my way out the door, and that was it. I should have known better with my history and struggles with addiction and recovery. I should have known better, but I fucking took them, and I justified it. Oh, they were prescribed by the surgeon, the doctor, and I was in pain. I broke my ankle. And man, you think I would have known better, with all my knowledge and wisdom of addiction, and, the whole pill mill thing was going on at the time, and where I was living, Central Florida, was out of control at the time. But I started taking them, and I got hooked, man. Went on a 9-year run with that shit, and long story there. Lots of war stories that I've told on here and other times, But now, like I said, man, coming up on March 11th, I will have 3 years clean again. Oh my God, I'm so fucking grateful. I was talking about, I had a meeting the other day, I try to work a program, y'all. I really do, in recovery. I have peace in my life most days. I get involved with things other than just 12-step meetings, man. I go to the gym on the regular. Fitness has been such a big part of my recovery. It's one of the topics of this podcast, exercise. We've talked about many, many times on here. I go to yoga. I try to meditate, have peace in my life, that whole enlightenment thing, and them hashtags up at the top. Very involved with music, man, producing music, singing, auto tune. We're going to talk a lot about music tonight, by the way. All the things. But man, some days I still romance using and specifically drinking for some reason. That shit brought me to my knees, man. And it just goes to show, it tells me that old saying that addiction is a sickness that's threefold, man. It's physical because it fucks your physical health up big time, man. When you use on a regular basis and get loaded daily and it goes on for weeks and months and years, oh, there ain't no way around that, man. It is detrimental to your physical health. Certainly fucks with your peace and your spiritual health, and then it also fucks with your mental health, man. As we often say, when you start using, the very first thing affected is your judgment. You start to make bad choices. And it is a mental sickness. There's that word disease, addiction, alcoholism is a disease. And oh man, I've always like, I don't want to get any on me. That word disease fucks with a lot of people in recovery. It's like, is it really a disease? Because you think of it as, like cancer is a disease, diabetes is a disease, the American Medical Association or whoever the fuck it is, that agency, clinically and all describes it as a disease. Some people have no problem with that word. I've had people explain it to me. Well, think of it as dis-ease and all that other shit, whatever the fuck. For me, I get around that by thinking of it as a sickness, whether it's a disease or not. I don't care who labels it or whatever fucking agency labels it that way. Each person has to decide for themselves. Do they really think it's a disease? I don't think anybody can deny it's a sickness. And when someone gets caught up in it, oh, it's horrible, man. It kills people regularly on a daily basis, man. We've talked about it over and over on this podcast. We're going to talk about it more tonight. But anyhow, getting off track there a little bit, I definitely think of it as a sickness. And where I was going with that is it still tries to hijack my thinking. It is physical, it is spiritual, and it's mental. And that's a tough pill to swallow sometimes when you first get clean, man, and they tell you it's physical, spiritual, and mental. You say, what are you calling me, mentally ill? Well, aren't we all? Some people might be better at hiding it than others. We talked about that on last week's show. I really enjoyed last week's show where we talked about authenticity, and being our authentic self, which I've tried really hard to do on this podcast. And, mentioned last week that, we all have that person in our life we like to call our rock, that solid person that I can always count on. Well, you know what? A lot of times that person we think of as a rock in our life, our anchor is fucking dying inside. We all suffer and struggle, I think, to a certain extent with mental illness at certain times, man. We all go through the moodies. Nobody's in a great mood 100% of the time. We all have our mental challenges and mental struggles. And I think for people who do struggle with the sickness of addiction, it can be a little bit more of a chore getting around some of those mental challenges. Like I was just talking about, man, after everything that fucking alcohol put me through and brought me to my knees, almost killed. Have you ever been physically addicted to alcohol? I know I focus a lot on opiates on this podcast, but really, This is about any kind of addiction, but if you've ever been physically addicted, dependent on alcohol, oh, it's fucking horrible, man. At first relapse, I was so fucking hooked on the booze. I swear to God, man, not to get into war stories, but if you know, you know. You wake up in the morning, you're literally fucking shaking, and the first thing you can think to do is force a fucking shot of booze down just to calm your shakes. And then who the hell wants to do a shot when they first wake up in the morning? So you do it at the kitchen sink because you already know you're gonna fucking throw it right back up. And then you gotta force another one down, and oh my God, I don't fucking miss that. Oh God, I don't miss that. Thank God I don't have to live like that anymore. And if you're going through that and you come across our podcast and you're watching and listening, and I see we got a few people in the viewing room, welcome to the Dare Me podcast. Appreciate y'all being along for the ride. And by the way, we have a live chat room too. You're welcome to join in, and we'll flash the phone number on the screen if anyone wants to call in while we're live. But yeah, man, I do not miss living like that. Oh my God. And that's why I say, I think I kind of got on this little topic of addiction and alcoholism, whatever the fuck you want to call it, being a mental sickness, because after everything it put me through, that horror I just described of having to force a shot down when you first wake up, my sick thinking, my addictive thinking will still romance thinking about drinking. Now, we're going to play a video here in a little while near the end of the show that addresses this topic, but I don't really think about all that other shit. I don't really, I damn sure don't miss being addicted to them opiates. I don't miss the crash from cocaine. I don't miss being burned out and fucking tired and fuzzy brained all the time from smoking weed and all that other bullshit. I do miss drinking sometime. I ain't gonna fucking lie. I miss it. Sometimes I romance it. And thank God for that old saying in the program. You know, it's a cliche and, you know, all that other shit, but it's a good one, man. When I start romancing them good times, because I did have good times, I got to remember to play that tape all the way through. And, you know, there's always some smart ass around the 12-step rule. Well, you never really had no good times when you were using. That was all drug induced shit. I often say, well, bro, I feel sorry for you. I don't know who the fuck you were using with, because I damn sure had some good times. Oh, man, I had good times. And they were good times until they weren't anymore. And that's when the horror starts, when you get physically addicted, physically dependent, and you have to use against your own will when you don't even want to, just to try to get right and feel normal, whatever the fuck that is. Thank God I don't have to live like that anymore. But yeah, man, that's how I know it is a mental sickness, because who in their right mind would want to return to the source of their allergy? Yes, I often think of it. You know, I'm allergic to that shit. Motherfuckers want me to go out drinking. It's like, oh no, bro, you don't want me to start drinking. I'm allergic to that shit, you know. So anyway, with all that said, y'all, we are into episode 51 now of the Dare Me podcast. A little bit of an introduction to your old pal Glenn Victor's history with addiction. And I got to tell you, man, I'm really looking forward to getting this third year clean again behind me. You know, yeah, it's a milestone. I'm excited about it. I am kind of proud of myself, pat myself on the back. I've worked hard for it. I'll also say, you know, and I know this from personal experience too, and I've definitely heard other people in the recovery community say this, when you're coming up on one of those anniversaries, birthdays, whatever you want to call it, clean time birthday, you know, this milestone, you start to get a little antsy. You start to get a little squirrely. You know, what's it all for and all that other shit. You know, I just kind of looking forward to getting it over, getting it behind me, and moving on, getting on with my life, you know. And so, like I was saying, next weekend it's going to be a very fun and exciting weekend. I'm looking forward to, first and foremost, you know, seeing my son. I haven't seen Glenn in a while. And we're going to be able to spend some time together, be there for a week there in Hawaii with him. Celebrate my 3-year clean anniversary with him. He was such an instrumental part of helping me to get clean this time around. And then, of course, we'll do the episode 52 of the Dare Me podcast together live from Honolulu next Sunday. And then we're gonna, take a breather from this and bring Dare Me 1.0 to a close, to a conclusion. Take a breather for a while, and then we'll be back with Dare Me 2.0, which we've talked about before. We won't be going live anymore. We'll be doing recorded shows. May go live once in a while from time to time for some special occasion or what have you, but not on a regular basis like we have for the last 52 weeks in a row, pretty much. Next week as well is a very special weekend because a fighter we've talked about on this podcast many times, famous UFC fighter Dustin Poirier is fighting next Saturday night, and Glenn and I will be together to watch that fight. And as we've talked about on this podcast many times, Glenn is a huge supporter of Dustin Poirier's Good Fight Foundation. And oh man, if you're looking for a good organization to support, good nonprofit that does great work in the community, man, one of the areas they focus on is helping young kids with cancer, fulfilling some of their dreams, things to that nature. And Glenn's flown from, where he was living in Florida to Louisiana a couple times to support the 5K run fundraiser for the Good Fight Foundation. He's kind of sort of become buddies with Dustin Poirier. They've known each other for several years and, met at different fights and stuff. And so just so proud of my son, Glenn, if you can't tell, and also proud of Dustin Poirier. Talk about the comeback kid, man. If you know his story, he didn't fare so well in his last fight. I'd never say he lost because he ain't no fucking loser, that's for sure. He just did not win that last fight. If you know, you know. And he's coming back again, man. I'm so excited about this fight Saturday. Confidence is high that he's going to win. So, yeah, that's next Saturday, too. And then a little sidebar to next weekend. We go back on daylight saving time. Woo! I'm so fucking happy about that, man. I love daylight saving time. I wish we stayed on daylight saving time year round. I know every year, man, it gets talked about in the media and all over social media and, politicians every fucking year in just about every state around the country talk shit about how we're going to go on daylight saving time permanently. And it seems like we just never do. And I am one of them guys who truly loves it when it stays light out later. I'm a night person by nature, so I love it when it stays light out till like 9 o'clock at night. Of course, up in the north, even almost till 10 o'clock at night. It's getting dark out at fucking 5 o'clock. What the hell is that? That's crazy. We're smarter than this, people. Come on, man. We can get off that time thing permanently if we wanted to and incorporate daylight saving time regularly. So anyway, not to get too far off topic, but lots of fun and exciting stuff coming up next weekend. But in the meantime, and in between your toes, right now in Central Florida, it's a big weekend because Bike Week is going on. And let's bring our old pal Dean Baker back into the show. Dean, as we've talked about on this show before, you are a motorcycle enthusiast. You have your own YouTube channel. What's it called again? The Honda. Help me out here. What's it called?
Honda Trail Traveler.
Honda Trail Traveler. And again, I don't mean to speak for you, but you go on these motorcycle rides on your Honda with a GoPro camera and take people along for the ride. And I just love it, man. Yeah, there you go. There's Dean's channel. And if you're looking for a fun channel to watch, y'all, Dean takes you on all these different adventures. So I got to ask, Dean, have you been over to Bike Week with it just kicking off a couple days ago?
Well, had such a busy, 3 weeks ago, I planned for this to be pretty much in Daytona for 3-4 days this week. And then, of course, systematically, every single one of my clients came out of the woodwork and said, oh, by the way. And so my week started shrinking down. And then if it wasn't that, then the weather. And I'm looking at the weather like 4 days ago, I started looking at the weather for the weekend, and it showed rain all week long.
Right.
So Friday night, I'm going, sometimes the weather just does a last minute curveball changes. So let's check. And of course, the weather for Saturday, yesterday, had it looked like it pivoted later in the afternoon hour. So I said, screw it. I got on the bike. I rode out. I was there by like 11 a.m. The first rain shower came at 3. It was brief. Um, and then I rode around for another hour, and then another brief rain shower came, and then I saw a gap about 5 o'clock, and I says, I better take it as a sign, otherwise, it's going to be a wet journey home. So I got a few good hours out at Daytona. I took a test ride on I wanted to ride a Royal Enfield motorcycle.
Oh,
And
wow. How was that?
that was fun. That was really fun. It was on my short list of bikes that I'm looking at,
Well, if
and
I may,
yeah.
Dean, just to interject, for those who don't know, who've never been to a big bike event like Bike Week, Biketoberfest, what have you, there's a lot of opportunity to do demo rides.
Oh
Different
yeah.
bike dealerships, manufacturers will have these huge tents and display areas set up and expo areas, and they actually coordinate these demo rides where you just sign up. Obviously got to have your endorsement, know how to ride and stuff, and they're little guided rides where they'll take you out for a couple of miles so you can ride their bikes, and obviously they're hoping you like it enough to buy one.
Oh
But
yeah.
man, I'll tell you what, bro, I'm a little homesick when Bike Week and Biketoberfest roll around, because I
Well,
used to love going, man. So how
well,
was the
certain
demo ride? Was it good?
certain brands like Royal Enfield was a group ride. Sure, it was a
Oh,
led
okay.
group ride. They take you around basically around the airport, around the
All right.
speedway
Which
and
is
the
right.
airport.
Yep.
But Triumph were doing individual rides where you could just hop on the bike, go around the block, and be at
Right.
your own pace, as well as Indian. And I
Yeah.
didn't get to go on them because of the rain. The second it started raining, they all started looking at their insurance policy and going, I don't think we should let people ride our bikes, looking for trouble. So I'm going
Yeah.
to try and make it out there again this week. We'll see,
Yeah.
and because I really do. Kawasaki, they were mobbed for people trying to do demo rides, but
Yeah.
Kawasaki brought back an old bike called the Eliminator, and
Oh, yeah, yeah, I remember.
remember that?
Yeah,
Yeah, they
I still
brought that
do.
model back this past
Wow.
year. So I sat on it. I was going, oh my god, this feels so good. I wanna ride this bad boy. And of course the rain kind of kept me from doing that. So,
Bro, I
um,
gotta tell you, Dean, I actually thought about buying an eliminator back
yeah,
in the day. Just a
yeah,
little bit of a history for some of our viewers and listeners who maybe don't know. I used to run the Motorcycle Safety Foundation, MSF Foundation program at a company in Central Florida, excuse me, called the Florida or United Safety Council. And it's a nonprofit agency I worked for almost 25 years, believe it or not. And for about, I'd probably say about 5 years of that stretch that I worked there, I ran the motorcycle training program, which again, it had we had a partnership with the state of Florida, so it was called the Florida Rider Training Program, but we used the MSF Motorcycle Safety Foundation program curriculum. So anyway, with all that said, y'all, obviously I know a little bit about motorcycles, and back in them days, I, learned how to ride, and I was looking at all these different bikes, and of course, everybody was trying to talk me into a Harley and all that. And I had nothing against Harleys, man. I love all my Harley friends. My brother, he loves Harley. He's got 3 of them, man. Uh, but I ended up going with a Suzuki Intruder. Oh my God, I loved that Intruder, man. I don't currently own a bike. It's around this time of the year every year when I start getting that itch again to get one. And I'm sure I'll have one again one day. It's just, in the transition of moving and all that other stuff, it's just not the right time. But, again soon. So anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic, but the point is, Dean, that yeah, man, I thought about the Eliminator,
Mm-hmm.
but I ended up going with an Intruder. But before I did, check this out. I had to show this picture. There's your old pal Glenn on a Valkyrie. Now we were talking about Hondas, Dean.
Yeah.
Holy
That's a
cow,
Honda.
man. They don't make the Valkyrie anymore, but this is it's very similar to the Goldwing. It's
Yeah.
basically the same motor as a Goldwing, just more of like God, man. I mean, I don't even know how to describe it. These bikes were
It's a
powerful.
cruiser. It's just a cruiser. It's just
Yeah.
not as not like equipped as the big whatchamacallits you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, I knew we'd be talking about Bike Week a little bit, so I had this picture. I had to pull it and show it, and I got to just tell this quick story for our motorcycle enthusiast friends, viewers, and listeners. So I mentioned that I ended up going with the Suzuki Intruder, which I love, man. I just freaking loved. And by the way, you can get 800 or a 1200, at least you could, of the Intruder. I'm assuming it's probably still that way. Obviously, the 1200's got more get up and go than the 800, but they're both awesome bikes and very sleek and slim. I used to get more compliments on that bike everywhere I went with it, even if I just ran up to the 7-Eleven. I missed that bike. But anyway, I mentioned my brother's a huge Harley fan. Well, before he went with Harley, he owned this particular bike that I'm sitting on right here, this Valkyrie. And he was part of this, they weren't like a motorcycle gang, but they kind of sort of were. There was a group of probably about, I don't know, 8 to 10 guys that all rode Valkyries, and they used to ride together. And oh my God, man, these guys all fucking hollowed out the pipes and shit. You could hear them all coming from a half mile away when they were out riding together. So anyway, long story short, I'm hanging out at my brother's house once. This is up in the Metro Detroit area. And it wasn't too long after he got this bike. And he's like, bro, you got to ride this bike. Oh my God, man. I want you to feel the power of this thing. And I'm like, Lenny, I ain't fucking riding that bike, man. I ride a Suzuki Intruder. This is a fucking car on two wheels. And in case you can't tell, if you look there, y'all, that is a 6-cylinder motor. For a motorcycle, there's cars that only have 4 cylinders. This is a 6-cylinder motor. Like I say, it's the same motor basically as a Goldwing. It's just got a lot of more power, get up and go. He's like, oh no, man, you'll love it. It sits real low. I just really want you to check it out, man, so you can feel this power. And I'm like, all right, bro, I'll just ride it down the street. And we're like, in the neighborhood that he lives, just a residential street. And I'm thinking, all right, I'll just ride it down this street just to feel it. And it did. It sat nice and low because I'm not a real tall guy. I'm like 5'7". I don't like bikes where my tippy toes got to, hold me up. I want my feet sitting flat on the ground. So I was real comfortable on it. I said, all right, let me go. And oh my God, man, you feel that power. But I was so comfortable on it. So check this out. So he lives probably about 6 blocks from this main road that, is called Michigan Avenue up in the Metro Detroit, Michigan area. So I'm like, well, fuck it, man. I'm feeling comfortable on this bike. I am enjoying the power. All right, let me get out of the neighborhood. I'll just go up to Michigan Avenue. So I go up to Michigan Avenue. Now I get on Michigan Avenue where, the speed limit's like 45, 50. So I get out. Now I'm opening it up a little bit. Well, a mile down the road from there is a freeway, I-275. So now I'm riding. I'm like, fuck it. I'm having fun. Let me just I'll do a mile on 75, So I get on the freeway. Now I'm like flying down the freeway. I'm doing 80, you know what I mean? I go up to the next exit up at Ford Road, got off, turned around, came back, So I didn't point I'm making, I didn't get back to his house till like a half hour later. And he thought I was just going up the street. And he's like, dude, what the fuck? I was wondering what happened, where you were. And I'm just like, oh my God, man. Once I rode that Valkyrie, Dean, and felt that power, man. Oh man, there ain't nothing like it. And whew, yeah, he ended up getting rid of that bike. He sold it, and like I said, he's a Harley guy now. He loves them Harleys, man. But I will tell you, this picture right here, I knew we'd talk about Bike Week a little bit, so I pulled it out of my photo album. I thought I'd show it to you tonight. So with all that said, I'm just curious. I know, you like riding the Honda and all that. And have you ever thought about getting like a Gold Wing? I could see you on a Gold Wing so easy, bro.
I'm not a cruiser kind of guy. I like the scramblers. I like the, even the bobbers. When I test drove that Indian Scout, was really nice ride. That's as close to a cruiser I think I'm gonna get. But the bike that I did test drive was more of a dual sport scrambler type. It's called the Scram.
Right. Yeah, I know.
And which
bike,
means it can go off road as well as on road, and which is what really got me in trouble breaking my leg, was going off road. And,
well, you brought it up.
Another story.
Dean, we talked about it on this podcast. What has it been? It's probably been at least a couple months now where, as you said, you didn't have
3 months ago. Yes.
Crash. Yeah, it was just kind of lost balance in the sand being off road and kind of fell the wrong way and broke your leg. But you've bounced back from that big time. You're already out riding again, man. That's awesome. So
as soon as the doctor said I could put its weight bearing as needed, well, I needed. So so I was on the bike after 6 weeks with a pin in my leg, and and I still got a little bit of a limp. There's still a little pain, but it's it's fleeting. So
yeah, well, and we talked about that in great detail, y'all. And if somebody's watching or listening and you'd like to go back and hear a little bit more about Dean's journey and story, with breaking his leg and the whole process, we did a podcast which was called, what was it? Was it Live from Orlando? I think was the name of it. And I guess it's a great opportunity for me to put a plug in for the Dare Me Podcast YouTube channel, which, by the way, right now we are live on, I say it all the time, half dozen Facebook pages. We're live on X, which used to be Twitter. We're live on Threads. We're live on Twitch. We're live on LinkedIn. We're live all over YouTube on different YouTube channels and all the things. But I try to guide people to that Dare Me Podcast YouTube channel, which I looked at, by the way, coincidentally today, Dean. We have 127 subscribers to that channel now, and just a year ago, it didn't even exist, so that might not sound like a lot to, some of these people have gone viral, but for the sake of what we're doing with this podcast, trying to help even one person, get through struggles with addiction and things to that nature, and provide entertaining, what we hope is entertaining content for anyone, like things we're talking about right now. That's a huge increase. But nonetheless, if you go to the Dare Me Podcast YouTube channel, you click on that videos tab, you can scroll down and see all the episodes of this show we've done. I'm behind on posting a couple of the edited ones, but if you go to the live tab, they're all there. I just try to clean them up after we do them, because when we go live, we always go live a few minutes early, and we have a countdown, and you'll hear us chatting before we start the show and all that shit. And I try to clean them up, and then they go on the videos tab, and they're all there. But we did one live from Orlando, and we had great guests on that show. We had that boy Marvin Lilly and that girl Marla Stevenson, very active in the recovery community. That was a great interview we did there at the Post Effects Media, PFX Media Studios in Orlando, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And Dean told his whole story about his mishap on his motorcycle and the surgery, how he got through it with, I don't mean to speak for you, Dean, but got through it without having to use them pain meds, and all that stuff. And really appreciated you telling that whole story, Dean. So, anyhow, yeah, shout out to everybody that's at Bike Week in Central Florida. Right now, it just kicked off Friday and it goes through next Sunday, a week from today. I got a lot of friends that are over there partying. In fact, I just saw a friend of mine, a lot of people from Michigan go down. Shout out to that friend of ours, Doug Henson. He posted online that he just got to the state of Florida and that he's going to be there all week. And I know one of his stops will be Bike Week. So anyway, we talked about the PFX Media Studios there in Orlando. And I just wanted to show this picture again. That's where Dean is coming to us live from in Orlando. And Dean, just wanted to put another plug in for you, man, because next week with me being on the road in Hawaii and all that stuff, not sure we'll get a chance to do that again then. I'll try to remember to and see if we can, but definitely wanted to put a plug in for you one more time tonight for anyone who may be watching or listening live or come across the recorded version of this podcast, which is where we get most of our views and listeners. We like going live, and I see we still got people in the viewing room listening and watching. Shout out to y'all. We appreciate that. But most people do check out our podcast when they come across the recorded version. So if you're one of them folks and you've ever thought about doing your own podcast on whatever topic it may be, Dean and PFX Media are your guys. Dean, I know we talked last week. You had a busy day. Our podcast was like the third one you did in one day last Sunday, right? So, anything you want to add to that, man? If somebody is thinking about doing a podcast or needs any kind of video production work or what have you done, take a minute to talk about it, bro.
Well, it's you really said it all. I just want to add that you don't have to be in Orlando, as we proven here. Glenn is on one side of the country. I'm on another, and so you don't have to be in just one location to do a podcast. Sometimes,
that's a great point, Dean. This particular picture just happens to be from when I was visiting Orlando last summer. So I went by the studio there and I thought, hey, let's get some pictures and stuff. And so, but yeah, here I am all the way out in California. Dean's all the way over in Orlando. And, we've had people on this podcast from all around the country and other parts of the world. So that's a good point, Dean. You don't have to be based in Central Florida and Orlando to work together with Dean if you thought about doing a podcast. And I'd like to mention too, Dean, because you and I have a long working history together that goes back 25 years, a long time dating ourselves, which we're going to talk about aging a little bit later in this podcast. But I thought I should mention that you do webcasting as well. You and I have worked together on a lot of conferences, conventions, award banquets, seminars, things to that nature. And I know that's something that's really popular now, that a lot of companies or agencies have put on these big conferences will actually broadcast them over the web so that people who maybe can't attend in person can still participate. And that's something you guys provide as well, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyhow, with all that said, y'all, if you'd like to maybe work together with Dean, PFX Media, and you're all over the internet and they can find you online anytime, right?
Yes.
There you go. All right. Well, hey, y'all, just wanted to put that little plug in for Dean on the front end there, talk a little bit about Bike Week, had some fun with that. And this particular edition of the show, a little bit different than maybe some of our standard format that we've done over the past year. We're certainly going to talk about a couple stories in the news. having to do with the opioid crisis. We're going to talk about it here in the States. Had some interesting news come out about the opioid crisis in Minnesota and North Dakota, of all places. And we're also going to talk about it in the Ukraine. I mentioned, that we do have viewers and listeners, not just around the United States, but literally other parts of the world. We get these analytics from YouTube. Our second largest viewing audience is in the UK. Shout out to all our folks and friends in the UK. We get a lot of people tuned in from Canada, South and Central America, overseas in Europe. We've had people from Romania. We've had people from Saudi Arabia. We had a caller from Saudi Arabia. Awesome. Shout out Awesome, who tunes into our podcast from Saudi Arabia. So, yeah, man, we do get, it just blows my mind the reach that we've had this past year with this podcast without tooting our own horn. I'm just saying. So anyway, yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the opioid crisis in the Ukraine, where there's a horrible war going on right now. But came across a very interesting story in the news about what's going on with the opioid crisis and the drug problem over there right now. So that's coming up. But right now, y'all, we're going to do a couple of shout outs. And sometimes we save these till the end of the show, but we're going to go ahead and do one right now. And this is a friend who we've had on the show before in the chat room. He's been in the chat room with us a few times. That boy, Eric T. He is actually, as we speak, right at this moment, attending. I happen to know this because he posted it online. And again, I know Eric would not mind us putting this out there. He's got it all over social media. He's participated in our podcast. He is currently at my Central Florida Narcotics Anonymous home group in Orlando, known as Still Working on It. And he posted that he would be picking up his 33-year clean. Whoo, man, trying not to get emotional talking about it because he's an old friend of mine that I've known for a long time. Originally from New York, but he's been living in the Metro Orlando, Central Florida area for years. And he is celebrating 33 years clean. He celebrated a couple days ago. This is something I pulled from his social media, and he's being presented his medallion at the Still Working on It group tonight, right there in the metropolitan Orlando area. So shout out to Eric T. Love you, brother, and hope to see you soon again. Hopefully you'll get a chance to see this. I'll make sure I send you a message letting you know we did a shout out for you. And at the very least, hope to see you in Orlando, maybe at the NA World in DC. Eric and I attended the World in Philadelphia several years ago, of course, in Orlando. He's a real one, y'all. He's a real one. And if you know, you know. So anyway, shout out to Eric T. Now we're going to send a shout out to that boy Kasky. There he is. He got married this past week, and oh my God, man, I'm just so happy for the guy. If you're a regular viewer, listener to the Dare Me podcast, you know how I fucking stand about fucking Kasky all the time. But what a great guy, man. And without getting into the long story about it, Kasky and one of his producers and currently his road manager, who's been a guest on the podcast, Marlon Sorrentino, who goes by the stage name Anonymous. Shout out to Mass. Were inspirational to me with getting this podcast started. We had talked about doing this podcast, and I had this idea for it, and was pretty committed to moving forward with it. But I attended this conference that Kasky and Mass put on a little over a year ago that I've talked about on this podcast many, many times. And we're going to talk about more tonight, called the Future of Artists Summit. and I attended it with the two guys you see me here with Pesky. You got
Hey Glenn,
Shebang.
I'm gonna interrupt and say Shivang is on the phone with you
Oh,
right here.
well, what a coincidence. Here I am talking about him, and he calls in on the phone. So, hey, Shebang, how are you tonight, my brother?
What's up, my
Oh,
brother?
I can't hear him, Dean. We gotta pot him up. I hear a echo in the background, but I'm not. Hang on, Shebang. We're gonna get you on here, man. How about now? Oh, see, now I'm not hearing Dean.
Hang on.
Okay.
He should be on. I had to.
Hello, hello.
Okay, there you go. Now I hear you. What's happening, Bang?
What's up, brother?
Oh my God. Thank you so much for calling in, man. And your timing was almost like perfect. It's like weird how it worked out because I've been running my mouth here for, geez, already almost an hour. And we brought up this picture of you and I and Brendan and Kasky at the music summit last year. And I literally was just going to start talking about you and you called in. So good timing, bro. How's it going?
It's going well, man. I just got out the shower and yeah, just hanging out.
Right on. Well, hey, bro, this, I don't know if you can see it because we've got you on the phone. But man, you're in this picture, you're wearing that Grand Theft Auto hoodie. And every time I go anywhere with you, if you're wearing that thing, man, people just love it and can't help saying something about it like cool hoodie, bro. you know?
Yep, yeah. It's a cool hoodie, huh?
Well, hey, man, I was just giving a shout out to Kasky when you called because, as you know, he got married this past week, man. And so I thought I'd give him a shout out and talk a little bit about the summit and all, man. And so, yeah, I just happened to bring up this picture of when the three of us, me, you, and Brendan, were hanging out with them, bullshitting in the parking lot when we went to that music summit, you know?
Oh man, that was a great experience, man, for an artist. And yeah, shout out to Kasky for getting married, man. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I was also, when you called in, Shivang, talking about how that, I had this idea of doing this podcast. That brainchild was born when you and I were hanging out and spending a lot of time together. And, I was kicking in Detroit and we went to that convention together in Florida. And it's kind of where I got the idea. And I kept talking about it and trying to flush out how I wanted to do it and get them ideas. And the point I'm making is, right before you called in, I was just talking about how, Kasky and Mass, Anonymous, were really the catalyst for me to get it going, to finally, as they like to say, level up and say, okay, I've been talking about this thing for so fucking long. It's time to get it started, man. And got back from that music summit. And within a couple of months, we got the podcast started, man. And you've been a huge inspiration to me with this as well, Shivang. And, as I think because I know you follow along with our stuff, we're going to do one more episode of this show live from Hawaii out there with that boy G next week. And that will bring us full circle where we've done one full 52-week year of the Dare Me podcast. And then we're going to take a breather for a while before we kind of start a 2.0 version. But I'm so glad you called in, Shivang, because, bro, I am forever grateful for you being, first of all, such a great friend to me. Also for being an inspiration for me to get this podcast started, and also for being a guest on this podcast. You definitely, were a huge part of this podcast this past year. I think you were on at least a half dozen times, weren't you?
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure to have been on the podcast, and gratitude goes both ways, man. I'm grateful for our friendship, and that was a huge reason why I wanted to call in is congratulate you guys
Oh,
for staying committed, man, for the 1 year. I know that's a big commitment, and you guys rolled through with it. I remember when Dare Me was just an idea in your mind, man, and to
yeah.
watch it come to fruition is it's been beautiful.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today earlier, Shivang, when I was living in that, beach house without the beach apartment, I like to call it, up in Detroit there for the summer a couple years ago. And I was just sitting at the kitchen table one day doodling, trying to come up with a name for this thing. And it was almost like I just, my hand took on a life of its own. And before I knew it, I doodled out this name, Dare Me, and put these little hashtags above the letters, and then we ended up, commissioning with that boy Dustin Warbear to design the logo, and the rest was history, man. We were off to the races, and here we are a year later, about to bring one full year of the Dare Me podcast to a close. And I got to tell you, man, some of the best episodes that I think we did, Shivang, you were a part of. You and I communicated, I don't know, a week to 2 weeks ago, how we did that one episode all about suicide, man, and mental health. And that was a deep episode, bro, but I also think it was one of the best ones we did. And man, talk about getting vulnerable and self-disclosure. I'm forever grateful to you, man, for sharing, part of your journey with us on that podcast and all the rest that we did together. We did some good shows, bro. And I also know for a fact, Shivang, that we have helped some people. So thank you again. And thank you calling in today, bro. That was very cool of you to think.
Dude. Like I said, man, it's just I'm just grateful that I can be part of the greater clan, and yeah, man, I fuck with Dare Me because they keep it raw, man. We keep it raw in there, So
Well, you rock, bro. Well, listen, I won't hold you hostage, man. I know you just got out the shower and probably got plans and all that, but thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to call in and check in with us, man. And we'll catch up off the air again here real soon, bro. And then, man, I can't wait to see you again, whether you come back out here and visit in Cali or I come back to the D, you know what I'm saying? But,
yes, sir. We will plan something.
All right. Well,
we're definitely going to plan something, man.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? Before we cut you loose, I'm going to keep talking about you once we let you off the phone. But they announced the next Future of Artists Summit. Caskey and Mass are working on putting that together, man. So that'll be coming up in June back in Orlando, man. So, we got to try to make it out there again, bro.
Fuck yeah. I'm definitely going to show Shub and the Rare Hearted Boys.
Yeah. Rare-hearted. Yeah. We'll talk more about it, man. Okay, Shebang. Well, thanks for calling in, bro. Peace.
All right, brother. You guys have a good one. All right.
All right. Thanks, man. Peace. Well, how cool is that? We had a caller, that boy Shebang, who's been a guest on the show many times. Again, if you go to that Dare Me Podcast YouTube channel, y'all, and you look through all the episodes there's some really cool ones that Shebang was a part of. And so, yeah, man, that was really cool. And by the way, Dean, in case anybody else who may join in, I see we still got some people in the viewing room. Who's in the chat room? I don't know who this is, but somebody's somebody is razzing Shebang about his hoodie there. But hey, it's all good, man. We love the attention. How's that go? Any attention is better than none at all. So, yeah, if you want, Dean, we'll flash the phone number up on the screen for anybody who may jump on board live while we're still live, or if you're listening maybe and not watching, you can call in 407-926-3946. And yeah, our friend in the chat room, I have a feeling that's a friend of Shebang's, just fucking with him right now. So anyway, shout out Shebang, thanks for calling in, and we appreciate it. So we want to send that shout out again to Caskey, congratulate him on getting married this past week. And I also thought, yeah, big applause for Caskey, and I thought we'd show this real quick too.
I'm here with my dog. We had the Future of Artists Summit. I just want to give a shout out. It's anonymous. I'm here with Glenn at the Future Artists Summit. Just want to say, keep following your purpose. Keep answering your calling and fucking turn up. Man, I'm here with my dog. We had the Future of Artists Summit. I just want to give a shout out.
Yeah, little video with a shout out from Kasky and from Anonymous. And there's another picture of me and that boy Brendan Fields, stage name YHB in the middle there. And then Shebang, who we just had on the phone, his stage name Neela. And by the way, we had YHB on the podcast as well. We did a deep dive interview with him, and that's there on the Dare Me Podcast YouTube channel as well. If you go to the YouTube channel, click on the videos tab, scroll down, and you will see the YHB Dare Me podcast. That was a great interview, man. And what a talented young artist. And we played a bunch of clips of his different music. Can't encourage you enough to go check that out, man. I tell you, here we are, episode 51. We did do some good shows. There were definitely some cringe ones. I mean, we had some cringe moments on this show. How could we not, with yours truly at the helm? But nonetheless, we did do some good ones too, some really good ones. And that one where we did the interview with YHB was a great one. So anyway, yeah, man, shout out to Kasky on getting married, and want to take a little bit of time to talk about this Future of Artists Summit because it was such a great event, y'all. Man, I've talked about it over and over and over on this podcast. For any young artists who may come across this podcast, whether you're struggling with an addiction or not, I can't encourage you enough to consider attending this thing. And when I say young artists, they gear it toward young artists involved in music. But it ain't just young artists. Here's your old pal Glenn Victor, 62-year-old grown-ass man. When I went last year, I was 61, and I'll be going again. And yeah, it's geared toward music. And, I've talked a lot on this podcast. I went because, I'm involved in music production now. I have, auto-tune software I use, Logic, Pro Tools, got a little studio set up here. I love recording music, been, doing a little singing, doing a little rap. I do a lot of covers, it's just become a passion of mine, something I like to have a lot of fun with and things to that nature. And I went here to learn some things, and I did. I learned a lot. Where I'm going with this, though, is this summit is not geared just toward people involved in music. I had a long couple of conversations with, Anonymous before I went last year, and I told him a little bit about the podcast. And I wanted to know, would I learn some things about how to properly promote the podcast with social media and all this other stuff? And he was like, oh, absolutely. And he wasn't bullshitting me, y'all. I learned a ton. There were a lot of graphic artists there too who went. And guarantee they learned some things, In fact, I mentioned Dustin Warbear, who is a talented rapper and musician, but also a graphic artist, designed our logo. We've probably had about a half dozen different people from that summit that we met there that have been guests on the podcast. And nonetheless, y'all, the announcement came out, as I mentioned when Shebang was on the phone, that they will be doing the second Future of Artists Music Summit back in Orlando, where it was held the first time, at a hotel called the Caribe Royale, which is a great location to do it. And all the information is out there. Here's a slide that, you can go on the internet. I didn't want to get too deep into putting all the details up there, but if you're interested and you Google Future of Artists Summit, guarantee you will find all the information you need about this thing. You'll find there's different levels you can register at, VIP dinners and all kinds of different stuff, man. Just get yourself there. There's information about the hotels, all that. Do what you got to do to get there. So anyway, I thought we'd show this video. And, I try to clean videos up where I'm not showing, the timestamp and all that shit, but I didn't do that with this one. I just captured it and thought we'd show it. And again, as I mentioned, Kasky got married this past week, so he's on his honeymoon. but he still took some time out to do a little promo reel for the next Future of Artists Summit. So let's give it a look and a listen. Here you go.
So I'm currently on my honeymoon in Sicily. This place is absolutely beautiful. When I get back, I'm going on tour around the country. But the thing that I'm looking forward to the most is the Future of Artists Summit that me, Anonymous, and Bedros Keuilian are hosting June 22nd and 23rd. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is an independent music conference that we put on with the goal to give artists all the game that I've learned over the last 10 years. Like, I've had an incredibly successful career, but more than that, I've had a really fulfilling career. I've met fans that have changed my life. I've made music that has an impact. I've met so many good people, traveled all over the world, and I'd be lying if I said that it didn't come with its fair share of like pitfalls or mistakes that I wish I hadn't made. So to the artists out there, I just want to say that I want nothing more than to see other like-minded people win. Like, music has absolutely changed my life and my family's life, and I'm not special. It could do the same for you. So before you go spend money on a playlist or think you need to find the right management or think you need to open for the right artist, come learn from somebody that's done it. Ask questions. Get over the roadblocks that are blocking you from living your best life. I can't wait to meet y'all June 22nd, 23rd, Future of Artists Summit.
Say that. Yeah. So there he is, that boy Kasky. A shout out, Kasky. Again, and congratulations on getting married this past week. Look forward to seeing you again, bro, at the Future of Artists Summit too. But check it out. Definitely gonna see him before that because he is going on tour when he gets back and, gets settled again from getting married and being on his honeymoon, and he's going on tour. And if you look, fourth show down in the list, he will be right here in my backyard in Sacktown. And he's playing at this cool place, the Starlit Room, that's right down in Midtown. And by the way, a little something we're working on kind of behind the scenes is having them local boys from Moving Forward Music be on the bill as well. Shout out Tyler Ullum, Josh Biddard from Moving Forward Music. We've had Tyler on the show before, talking with him. And man, when we start Dare Me 2.0, I'm still hoping to get them here in the studio and do a deep dive interview with both of them and their music. That was one on the bucket list for this 1.0 version, but scheduling conflicts and shit, it just never worked out. Shit, even with that boy Kasky, we're gonna get him on this fucking podcast, man. We've had him do the shout outs and stuff, which is cool. And we had Anonymous. We had a great interview with Anonymous, man. He spent a good hour with us on the podcast. Again, if you go to that Dare Me podcast YouTube channel, you'll see it. The Anonymous interview. That was a great one. But anyhow, I'm getting off track a little bit. Kasky will be playing live here in Sacramento on April 27th, right here in Midtown, with special guest Angel Hill. Shout out Angel Hill. Me and Angel, we trade messages from time to time. I met him at that first Future of Artists Summit, and he also has agreed to be a guest on the podcast, but just like two ships passing in the night with some of these guys sometimes, and scheduling conflicts, man, because everybody's so busy. But that's one thing I'm looking forward to with the Dare Me 2.0 version that'll be coming up down the road, y'all. We're going to take a little breather after next week's show for a little while. But then we'll be playing recorded editions of this show. It's going to give me and Dean a lot more flexibility with scheduling guests. We can record the show anytime we want during the week or whenever. And then, we'll get back to playing the episodes at our regular time on Sunday and all that. So anyway, more to come on all that. But in the meantime, and in between your toes, like I often like to say, we'll be seeing that boy Kasky here in Sacramento. I'm so excited, man. He puts on a great show too, bro. I've seen him a few times over the years, and it's going to be great. And I'm looking forward to hearing Angel Hill perform live. I've never seen Angel perform live. Love his stuff, by the way. If you've never checked out Angel Hill, y'all, you got to go check him out, man. Just look him up on, YouTube, whatever. And Oh my God, man, what a talented artist. And he's really had a great year this past year. Did a collab with Caskey. He's out doing all the things. So, anyway, y'all, yeah, man, shout out again to Caskey. Congratulations on your marriage. Congratulations on getting that second Future of Artists Summit scheduled finally. Congratulations on the upcoming tour, man. Thank you, thank you, thank you to both Cass and Mass for the inspiration for us to get this podcast started a whole freaking year ago. We got one more edition of Dare Me 1.0 next week when we're coming to you live from Honolulu, Hawaii. Of course, Deed will be live there in Orlando, Florida, but that's coming up next week. Then, like I said, we're going to take a breather for a while, y'all, and then we'll be back with Dare Me 2.0. So anyhow, that's that, y'all. Thought we'd talk a little bit more about other music since we're on the topic of music. And just, I guess it's been about a week or so ago, they announced the lineup for this huge music festival that they do here in Sacramento called Aftershock. And man, as you can see from the lineup here, it's insane. And this thing draws people not just from around the United States, but literally other parts of the world. And, you can buy like a 4-day pass for this thing. It ain't cheap. If you go the full 4 days, you're going to easily spend, $500-$600. I think it was $497 for the basic 4-day package, but they sell all kinds of VIP perks and all that other stuff. Or you can buy 1-day passes, 2-day passes. I'm not going to sit here and read all the artists on this list to you, but man, there's some fucking good ones. The two I would like to see the most that I've seen a couple of times each is Evanescence and Seether. Oh my God, I just love Amy Lee, lead singer from Evanescence. Shout out to that boy Mike Woods, by the way, the rocker Mike Woods, who's been a guest on the podcast a couple of times and shared his story with us, how man, he grew up with the drummer for Evanescence and went to one of their shows once and got to meet Amy Lee. And we showed some pictures. He told some stories about, when he was meeting with her and stuff. Man, oh man, what a talented rock chick, as she calls herself, by the way. That's her words, not mine, but she is a rock chick. And oh my God, I hope to go and see Evanescence and of course Seether. And it's kind of weird because Amy and Sean, the lead singer from Seether, used to date and of course did that awesome fucking video and song Broken. Oh my God, talk about a fucking classic masterpiece. If you've never watched the video Broken or listened to that song, I just can't encourage you enough to go check it out, man. It's truly a classic. And yeah, they used to date. I don't know. I'm assuming they're probably friends now. They're not a couple anymore, at least not that I know of. But here they are, both playing at Aftershock, but on different nights. I was joking with a friend of mine. I'm like, God damn, I wish they were playing the same night. And he was like, oh no, bro, that's how they get you. They have bands on different nights. So I'll be down there. I haven't decided yet if I'm gonna go for the full 4-day pass, but you can see Evanescence is playing on Friday night, and then Seether is playing where the hell is it? I'm looking at the thing on a different. Oh, they're playing on Sunday. Yeah. So, but man, you can see they got Iron Maiden there. They got Motley Crue. They got fucking ICP is playing there. The Juggalos and Cypress Hill. And oh my God, it's just. Yeah, man, it's going to be a blast for sure. But that's coming up in the fall. We'll be back with Dare Me 2.0 well before then. And so we'll talk about it more. But yeah, man, if you're a music fan and you come across this podcast, shout out again to everybody in the viewing room that's watching live. I see y'all. We see you there. Thanks for tuning in live. But for anybody who comes across a recorded version before this event happens, man, I'll tell you, you can see there's just a freaking great. But here's something I was thinking about. I was talking to a friend of mine. I'm gonna go because I get all excited about this kind of shit, obviously. But I was also telling my buddy, man, I've gotten spoiled. I've done a lot of things on this show, and done live shows at these smaller venues where I've seen some of my favorite artists at these small venues. We did one with God, I went to see Benny and Cannons down at the Roxy in LA. Saw Leisure at the El Rey in LA, and over in San Fran, and God, who else did I went to see? Claire Rosenkrantz. We got a shout out from her dad, Ragnar. Anyway, you get the idea. I'm gone to all these small venue. Mall Rat at Bimbo. Shout out Mall Rat, who also gave us a shout out. And you go to these smaller venues, man, you pay 50 to $100 to see one of your favorite artists, where you literally can put your elbows up on the stage, and then you go to something like this, Aftershock, and it ain't cheap, man. You pay a lot of money, and it's just massive crowds of people, and they do a pretty good job, I guess, of providing adequate facilities, whatever that means to you, and things to that nature. But yeah, man, you got to deal with a lot of traffic, a lot of people, all kinds of stuff, So to go to an event like this, you really got to get your mind right and go with the flow, because yeah, it's a lot different than going to the smaller venues. Like I said, I think I've gotten spoiled a little bit, but I'm going to get myself in the right mindset and head out to this thing and just take it all in and be a part of it. I just haven't decided yet if I want to go every single day or just try to catch a couple days of it. So anyway, just thought we'd talk about it a little bit, because that's one of the topics we like to talk about on this podcast is music. So yeah, y'all, when we're taking our little breather in between Dare Me 1.0 and Dare Me 2.0, I'm going to have an interesting spring and summer, because here's some more music news we've talked about in great detail on this show. Go back and watch the Stoned edition of the Dare Me podcast on that YouTube channel. Just click on that videos tab and you'll see it there. We talk all about the Rolling Stones. We had that boy Ronnie Woods on the show, giving some inspirational messages all about recovery. He's been very actively involved in the Recover Out Loud community, just like yours truly. And we played some video clips of Ronnie Wood doing some inspirational recovery readings. We talked in great detail about Eric Clapton's recovery center, where Ronnie, went through rehab and stuff. And anyway, with all that said, y'all, the Rolling Stones, in case you didn't know and been living under a rock, pardon the pun, are going on tour of the United States, man. I can't fucking wait. I got one. I'm going to go to a few of these shows. I got one ticket to the final show of the tour in Santa Clara, which is just about 2 hours from where I live here in Sacramento. And that'll be the final show of the tour. I'm going to be there for that one. But I'm also planning on going to opening night in Houston. I just haven't bought my ticket yet. I keep going online. I'm very well may go to Seattle and see that show, and hope to see my friend Derek. Shout out Derek, who lives in Seattle. We've talked about him on the podcast. One of my oldest friend, who we showed on the podcast some photos of a couple of weeks ago when we met up in Las Vegas to go see the George Clinton show. So anyway, hoping to see Derek when I go visit Seattle to see the Rolling Stones. That one's coming up in May. I've thought about going back to my old stomping grounds there in Orlando and see the show there. I've seen the Stones in Orlando a couple of times, Tampa a couple of times. I thought though, God damn, man, they're playing outdoors at the old Citrus Bowl there in Orlando, and June 3rd, man, that's one of the hottest, muggiest times of the year in Central Florida. But hey, I saw them all strung out on pills there once in the middle of the humid summer. Now that I'm drug free, I'm sure it wouldn't be as bad. So maybe I'll end up going to Orlando. I can meet up with Dean and some other friends and hang out. So yeah, man, I'm just still deciding which other Stone shows I'm going to go to. If you've never seen the Rolling Stones, man, yeah, I get it. They're old, been around the block, all that other stuff. But man, if you know your old pal Glenn, they are my favorite artists, my favorite group. I've seen them more times than I could even remember. And, every time they come around, man, we always say, well, this might be the last time, and this might just be, and so, they're all pushing 80, man. And, but they still got it. Still got it. Matter of fact, Keith Richards just released a video and song yesterday. He did a cover of this old Lou Reed tune, Waiting for My Man, all about waiting for the dope man and shit. Oh my God, it was awesome, man. I'm kind of hoping he might do that at one of these concerts, but yeah, go check that out, man, on YouTube. Go to the Keith Richards or just Google Keith Richards, Waiting for My Man, Lou Reed, whatever, you'll see it. It's really cool. He did a great job on that one. But anyway, just thought we'd take a little time to talk about the Stones tour coming up. It's going to be an exciting summer with that show going around. And then here's some other stuff that's coming up. I thought we'd talk about this. The Northern California Convention, which is also in Santa Clara. And I should clarify, the Northern California Narcotics Anonymous, NA Convention. And the theme this year is From Desperation to Passion. And that one is coming up in just a few weeks here. March 28th through the 31st at the Santa Clara Convention Center. And by the way, my sponsor, Shay, shout out Shay, is speaking at this convention. She's going to be speaking on the steps, the 12 steps on Friday night. She's one of the late night speakers, which of course I love being a night person. I think she's speaking at 11 o'clock Friday night about the steps. And boy, I was just thinking, man, there's another person that, man, we had on the bucket list to have as a guest on the podcast. Oh my God, what a powerful message. So grateful to Shay being my sponsor. We got to spend some time together last night, man. Well, it's our 3 nights in a row, my home group and a couple nights in a row. And we hung out, went out, got something to eat last night, went to this benefit and different things. But anyways, we're going to get Shay on that Dare Me 2.0 version of the podcast. And hopefully have her right here in the Dare Me podcast studio and record a whole edition of the show, hearing her powerful message and how she puts up with my crazy ass and listening to my shit, man. But anyway, shout out Shay. And for anybody else in the recovery community, whether you live here in California or any other part of the country, man, come on out and let's go to the Northern California Convention of Narcotics Anonymous together. I will be there March 28th through the 31st in Santa Clara. It's going to be a fun one to be sure. So as you can tell, even though we're bringing the Dare Me 1.0 podcast to a close after next week's show, live from Honolulu, Hawaii, episode 52, fulfilling 1 full year of the Dare Me podcast. We're going to take a break for a little while. We're going to take a breather. And then we'll be coming back with Dare Me Podcast 2.0. And those will all be recorded editions of the show that we're going to keep to 1 hour. And more to come on that as we go down the road. But I just thought we'd talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's coming up this summer and what I'll be up to. So I guess the point I was making is, y'all, I'll be staying real busy with other things, even though we won't be going live with this podcast every Sunday night and taking a breather for a little bit. So anyhow, with all that said, y'all, we're going to transition into the opioid crisis in the news. This has become a regular part of this podcast. You've heard me say it many times on this show that this podcast truly has taken on a life of its own. And that is true in so many ways without flowering it up and getting all mystical and shit. It just has. I just feel like, we've been led to do this. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here. Some days I'm like, oh, good God. Like I've said on this podcast many times, what have I done? Oh, my God, I'm just putting myself out here like this. And, like I've said many times when I first ran this idea by Dean, and Dean, you remember saying to me, well, Glenn, I'll work with you on this. We can do it. But just remember, talking about your struggles with addiction, once you ring that bell, bro, there ain't no unringing it. And so, yeah, man, it's like, sometimes I think to myself, oh, good God, what have I done? But no regrets, man. No regrets. 51 episodes in. I can't even begin to tell you the amount of people we've heard from thanking us for doing this podcast. In fact, I want to do a shout out to Peggy, one of our regular viewers and listeners now, and she's been posting on our YouTube channel comments that we're helping her. Just Peggy, if you see this one, man, maybe call in. If you might be checked in live, I see we got a few people watching live. Shout out to y'all again. Or if you maybe could tune in next week if you're not live with us right now. But Peggy, we'd love to hear from you or from anybody, by the way. 407-924-3946. So yeah, Dean, man, we truly have made a difference. We have helped some people. And that was the whole point and goal of us doing this thing. And so, yeah, man, thank you to Peggy for the feedback on our YouTube channel, telling us that we're helping her by doing this podcast. We don't know her whole story and struggles with addiction or what have you, but it's making a difference, y'all. And that's been our goal all along. And so anyway, where I was going with that is, yeah, y'all, this show has taken on a life of its own. And when we started, I didn't have this set format in stone of doing the opioid crisis in the news every week. And, we just did it one week. And before I knew it, it was like it became a regular part of the show. And we've done it every single week where we follow the opioid crisis in the news and talk about a couple of stories that are in the news that particular week. And so we're going to keep that tradition up right up to the end, y'all, and talk about a couple of stories in the opioid crisis news right now. So here's one. I talked about it briefly earlier in the show that we came across this past week. The Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, has revealed some disturbing drug trends in North Dakota and Minnesota, of all places. Not that they're immune to it like any other place, but, we've spent a lot of time on this show talking about, some pretty high profile locations when it comes to this whole opioid crisis, the fentanyl crisis and everything else. We've talked about how bad it is in Philadelphia. We've talked about how bad it is down in Miami in certain areas. Or certainly we've talked about San Francisco and how they're taking it on the chin. And oh my God, my trip down to the Tenderloin district, I keep plugging previous episodes of this podcast that we've done over the past year. And I'm going to do it again, man. Go watch Back from the, what was it called, Dean? Back from the Dead Back from the Dead, where I paid a visit to San Francisco last summer and we did 2 episodes. And one of them includes some video footage of me going down to the Tenderloin district. Holy cow, check that one out. But anyway, the point, we talked about how bad the drug problem is up in Detroit, my old hometown, and different places all around the country and other parts of the world. We've talked about how the opioid crisis is out of control in Israel right now, and not to get political and everything, y'all, but we all know what's going on over there in the Middle East and, Israel, Palestine, that whole thing. And I just thought it was quite interesting to hear that the opioid crisis is out of control in Israel right now. We talked about how it's out of control in Greece and Italy and South America and Canada and all the things. And so we're going to be talking about how it's out of control in the Ukraine right now in a minute too, where there's war going on. But first, let's talk about this story, because we haven't really talked about it at all in states like North Dakota and Minnesota. And so, again, as I often say, y'all, I don't want to read to you here on the podcast, but this is a story from just a few days ago. And you can hear or see here that, it goes into a little more detail. They, this time of the year, you start getting the final results of these studies and research they do for the previous year. And so they came out with this report that in 2023, last year, officials in North Dakota seized 21,000 more fentanyl pills than the year before, 30 pounds more of methamphetamine than the year before, and 2.5 more pounds of coke than the year before, which, 2.5 pounds of coke might not sound like a lot, but it's more than the year before. My point is this. Do you think they seized more than actually got through? Probably not. If they're seizing that much more, then the chances are pretty good that much more is getting through as well. I mean, it's great to see, of course, law enforcement out there doing their thing and that they are seizing more, but holy fucking cow, 21,000 fentanyl pills more than the previous year. And then, as it says in the next paragraph, across the Red River in Minnesota, there was a year-over-year increase of 234,000 fentanyl pills seized. And you get the idea, y'all. So, I've said it before, I'll say it again, that if you think this opioid crisis and now fentanyl crisis is getting better, you are badly mistaken. It's not getting better, y'all. It's not even staying the same. It just keeps getting worse. Like I said, yeah, it's great to see they're seizing more, but if they're seizing that much more, it just tells us that the market is being flooded that much more with more of this shit. And the chances are that more of it's getting through too. It's pretty freaking scary. And so, man, oh man, our little podcast, yeah, man, we're just a little, speck on the big spectrum. But if what we're doing and talking about on here and keeping this in the forefront, in the limelight, in the top of mind awareness can make even one little bit of difference, then hey, man, it's all for the good. That old saying, can't stop, won't stop. Believe me. Now that we've fulfilled this full year almost of doing this podcast, I thought about walking away from it. Like, okay, man, I made that promise. I made that commitment to myself to do this for one full year, because it's been a huge part of my healing process too, as I've talked about on this podcast, But like I said, we know we've helped some people. Again, shout out Peggy and all the others we've talked about on this podcast over the course of the past year that have reached out to us. We're so grateful to know that. And yeah, I thought about walking away from it, but man, when I hear about stories like this and hear from people like Peggy and the others, I get that mentality of, man, I can't stop, won't stop. We got to keep going, but we also got to take a breather for a minute. We are going to step back after next week's show. take a deep breath, regroup, look at the big picture. I've got some consulting going on and consulting things, and we're gonna reformat the show and package it up with a nice little ribbon and kind of make it a little more professional, if you will, and get it out there on all the platforms. The Spotify and the Apple and SoundCloud and all the things. Um, and get it out there a little bit more than just on all these social media platforms that I talk about. But that's all coming up down the road. But nonetheless, y'all, thought we'd talk a little bit about that man in places like North Dakota and Minnesota that we've never talked about the drug problem on this podcast. We always talk about all these high profile locations and how bad it is. This is like the heart of America right here, and it's just as bad there as anywhere else. And so I thought we'd show this little part of it. I like that they included this in the article because it kind of goes right in line with what we're doing on this podcast, trying to get the message out, get the word out, try to be a resource for people. And right at the top, this official they quoted in there says, it's an important time for parents to talk with their kids about the dangers of fentanyl and other drugs and speak with them about what they could potentially see online, all the apps and so on and so forth. The point is, man, these are all our young people. They don't want to fucking die, but they get these bullshit pills off the street that are laced with fentanyl and they die. And, I love that new saying that it's kind of a catchphrase that we picked up on at that, recovery event we went to in Sacramento last summer. That there's another episode of the podcast you might want to go check out. Go to the Dare Me Podcast YouTube channel, click on the videos tab, scroll down, and you'll find an episode called Recovery Happens. And that was a edition of the show we did where we attended an event at the state capitol in Sacramento called Recovery Happens. And we visited all these different booths and talked with a lot of people, provided a lot of information, resources. We even had a demonstration on that particular edition of the show on how to properly administer Narcan. That was a good show. Go check that one out. But the point I'm making, y'all, is there was a catchphrase we picked up on at that event called "One pill can kill." And that's a easy one to remember. Obviously, it rhymes. It's a good one to remember for anybody, not just our young people, because sometimes, man, if you're hooked on that shit and you start getting dope sick and you're thinking, man, I'll just get one more to kind of hold me over and I'm going to try to kick or one pill can kill if it's laced with fentanyl. And unfortunately, man, as it references in this article, it's a lot of our young people. So, man, if you're a parent and this is not a topic that is, openly discussed, man, don't be shy about talking to your kids about this kind of stuff, man. Just, because believe me, they know what's happening, and I think it's a good discussion to have, obviously. And then, I just talk about it here. It says, what they're primarily seeing is what we already know. All these oxycodone pills are fake pills that look just like the real thing, and they're laced with fentanyl. So anyhow, y'all, thought we'd talk about that. Let's shift gears now and talk about this story that I've mentioned a couple times already on the podcast. This is not a problem that's just local in your community. It's not a problem that's just, around the state. It's not a problem around the United States. It's a problem around the fucking world. All those places that we talked about. And I just thought this story was interesting. And we talk a little bit about it, about how the war going on with Russia and the Ukraine has worsened the opioid crisis in the Ukraine. And like it says there, right under that headline, Russia's invasion has shuttered drug treatment programs since 2014. That's 10 years ago, y'all, and forced people from their homes. New research shows the challenges Ukrainians have faced in accessing care. And, obviously they showed photos of bombed out buildings, but this is what I found interesting, y'all. It says what has been most disruptive for opioid treatment in the Ukraine. And, that's one thing about the internet, man, is God, it certainly has made the world such a smaller place. Like I've said, on this podcast alone, man, our second biggest viewing audience is in the UK. We got tons of people we hear from in Canada, South and Central America, and we've had people live on the show from Saudi Arabia. So our friends in the Ukraine are our neighbors. They're dealing with not just a war, but also with the opioid crisis. And what the problem is Russia does not tolerate drug treatment shit. They have no understanding of it, it seems. They just outlaw it and shut the shit down. And so, like it says here, in that paragraph, there is no methadone treatment in Russia. Opioid agonist therapies are prohibited. They don't allow it there. So that's why, as it says, once they take over a town that has a treatment site, it gets closed right away because it's not allowed. And if patients stay in that area, they just go back to fucking street drugs. They can't get Suboxone or methadone anymore. So this whole war with Russia and the Ukraine, as fucked up as it is, has also resulted in people dying from drug addiction because they're trying to use harm reduction and medication assisted treatment, whether it's methadone or Suboxone. But when Russia comes in and takes over a fucking town, they shut down any treatment centers. They don't fucking believe in it. It's against the law. So people that are trying to get clean on medication assisted treatment, maybe trying to wean down whatever the fuck, turn back to street drugs because they can't handle being dope sick or whatever the fuck, and get a hold of some of this bullshit out there now with fentanyl and fucking die. Yeah. How fucked up is that, y'all? So, man, it just goes to show, yeah, it's bad right here in our own backyards and all that other stuff. They're dealing with this shit over in fucking Ukraine on top of being in a war. And so, yeah, man, the 2014 invasion, as it says here in this part, kind of started this whole thing when there was an internal displacement. But after the full scale invasion in 2022, a lot of people have left the Ukraine because of their drug addiction. We've all heard in the news how, man, Ukrainians, them are some badass motherfuckers. Shout out to the Ukraine. And they don't play, they're fighting them Russians head up. What is happening, though, is a lot of the drug addicts that are seeking treatment have left because they can't get it anymore when Russia moves in and takes over these different towns. So, again, I just found the stories fascinating, man, and it's like it says here, a lot of them are going to places like Poland, Moldova, Romania, where we have viewers and listeners. Shout out to our Romanian friends of the Dare Me podcast, Germany. And so the people that did this article, they reached out, to some of the doctors in some of these other countries. And, again, y'all, I don't want to read to you here, but this guy goes to Poland and, gets his, 15-day supply of methadone there, And so I don't know, man. It's just, well, it ain't funny. I just hit that slide by accident. It's not funny at all. It fucking sucks for people over there, what's going on. And so, yeah, man, like I said earlier, we're just one little speck, one little grain of sand in the desert, one little drop of water in the ocean with this humble little podcast that we're doing and have been doing for 51 weeks in a row now. But if we can help even one person, like we say in that intro to our show that Dean put together, which I know I talk about it all the time, but goddamn, Dean, I love what you did with that intro, man. That was totally a Dean thing. I didn't have any.
Well, thank you much.
Yeah, no, man, you rock, bro. You are a rock star. I really appreciate that you put that together and that we repeat that over and over and over every week. If we can help even one person, then it's all worth it. And that's what I love about what we've done with this humble little podcast. is we know we accomplished that mission. We have helped some people. And so, oh, for that, man, I'm forever humble and grateful that my crazy ass on this podcast running my fucking mouth has even made any bit of a difference, man. And you have too, Dean. And so, not just like I said in our own backyards or different states or around the country, but literally other parts of the world. How fucking cool is that? I mean, that's like a big deal, Dean, when you think about it, man. Not to sound morbid, but God forbid we were both dead and gone tomorrow for whatever reason. We did something in this life, bro, that's helped people. And what a better thing to have accomplished. Man, I'm trying not to get emotional talking about it than to have helped another person in this life. And isn't that what it's all about at the end of the day? Trying to help each other, man. Yeah, there's fucked up people in this world, mean, nasty, evil motherfuckers. There's some kind of force for evil in this world. That's for damn sure. People are sick, they're mentally ill, whatever the fuck. At the end of the day, though, man, it's a damn good feeling when you can say, wow, we did something good, man. We did do something good. Like I've said before, I've even showed before and after pictures of myself coming out of a blackout where I was all fucked up, and I thought to myself, you know what, I'm glad I showed those pictures, man. It's kind of a trendy thing for people to do in the recovery community now, showing before pictures when they were all fucked up and after when they're better. But where I'm going with that is, if my misfortune, some of the challenges that I've gone through in my life, can help another person by me talking openly about it, as we say, recovering out loud, being the authentic version of myself, of Glenn, if that can help even one more person, and like I've said, y'all, I truly believe I have no right to keep that to myself, because it has made a difference with some people that have tuned into this show. And we know that because we've heard it from them. They've told us that. Like I said, that girl Peggy, shout out Peggy, one of our newest people that we've heard from. You can go to the YouTube channel and read some of her comments, even on some of those reels that you put together each week and put out there, Dean. So thank you again for all that. So anyway, y'all, we're gonna transition from the news to our ending of the show. We're going to wrap it up here in the next 10 minutes or so, y'all. We always have tried to wrap up the show with a little bit of humor. And so we show these different memes. Just like anybody, I come across all these different funny memes on social media throughout the week. And if I see some that catch my attention that I think would go good with the show, I'll capture them. And so here's one that certainly plays into what our show is all about. I thought this was funny as hell, man. Attention drug dealers, report your competition. And there's a phone number, 330-333-1TIP. And man, what a unique approach to this, I just couldn't resist showing this, man. And so it's one way to get one more dealer off the street, I guess. So that one was interesting. Moving along, y'all, this is an interesting meme that we're going to spend just a minute talking about. I thought it was funny because, you see all these younger people on social media, and shout out to all our young friends. Love y'all, love y'all, love y'all. Like I often say, man, I'm just a big kid myself. I'm a grown-ass 62-year-old man, but as I've said on here many times, I tell my kids I refuse to grow up. And as my son says, who's 32 now, Dad, growing up is overrated. So anyhow, though, y'all, I have a lot of younger friends, and I couldn't resist pulling this one because it says, as you see, y'all be out here 16 and stressed. And when I was 16, I was already a full-blown alcoholic. And oh my God, man, is that the truth? I was too. I had already been using on a daily basis for like, God, 4 or 5 years by then. I remember there used to be these. Do you remember those after school specials, Dean, that used to show on ABC? And there was one called uh, My name is Sarah T. Portrait of a Teenage Alcoholic. And if anybody's interested, I bet have to go look. I'll guarantee if you go on YouTube, you could probably find it. And this is like it was an after school special movie that they showed, and it was probably from sometime in the 70s, maybe the mid 70s. And I remember watching that thing thinking, oh my God, that's me, So this meme right here reminded me of that. These kids out here now are all stressed out with all the different things going on in this modern day life with social media and bullying and every other goddamn thing. And goddamn, man, at 16, and I know there's kids that are full blown addicts and alcoholics, in 2024 at that age too. But it just made me think to myself, God damn, when I was that age, I was already full blown addicted. And then that reminded me of this meme. And I just thought we'd show this, y'all. Oh man, this one hits home. It is only a short trip. Enjoy it. And it's got these two hands side by side, man. And you can see the hand on the right or on the left is obviously, it looks like a young girl's hand, and then an older woman's hand on the right. And it is just a short trip, y'all. Enjoy the ride. One of my favorite sayings is enjoy the moments, because God, it seems like it goes by like that. Even like with this podcast, here we are talking about next week will be the final edition of the Dare Me 1.0 version of the podcast. 52 weeks in a row. I can hardly believe it. I was thinking about it earlier today, like, oh my God, where did I come up with, where did we come up with the content for 52 episodes? I talked about it on here a couple of times, how I watched this one podcast. I listened to this one podcast called Recovery in the Middle Ages. These two guys who are middle-aged guys talking about recovery. And the one guy on there, he said people will ask him about stuff they talked about on their podcast. And he's like, dude, when I'm doing that podcast, it's like a blackout. I don't fucking remember half the shit we talked about. And that's how I feel too. I could so relate to what he said. I mean, obviously, I remember a lot of the stuff we've done. I've plugged a lot of them on this particular edition of the show. I'll also say, though, oh my God, I have no fucking idea, y'all, where this content has come from, filling 52 episodes, 2 to 3 hour shows for the last year. Like I've said before, none of this shit is scripted. None of it. We have a structure, an outline, put together these presentations of slides and videos, and have a general idea where we're going to go with it. And certainly we've had great guests on the show, but it's like I guess where I'm going with it, y'all, is I just still can't believe we've done a whole year worth of content. And so, like this meme here says, oh my God, it is just such a short trip. Enjoy it. That old saying, man, when it comes to looks, age truly is the great equalizer. So for all our young boys and girls, yeah, man, those looks are fleeting. You get older, and this is what you end up looking like. You got the cute, young girl hand on the left, and then you got the old woman hand on the right. And it goes by like that. And so I thought we'd show this next video, y'all, that kind of plays right into what we're talking about here. It all goes by so fast. This is a video from one of my favorite musicians, artists, and inspirational speakers. He truly was an inspiration and still is, even though he's been passed away for a long time. The famous Beatle, George Harrison. Let's just take a look and a listen to this video, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. Check this out.
It doesn't take long to be from 17 to being 57. 40 years just goes like that. You know, now I understand about 90-year-old people who feel like teenagers, you know, because nothing changes. It's just the body that changes.
Yeah.
The soul in the body is there at birth and is there at death, and the only thing that's changed is the bodily condition. So, you know, all this stuff about where, you know, age groups fit or don't fit, or where the music belonging to age groups fits or doesn't fit, is stupid. It's all just in somebody's concept, and all they do is limit the potential of the marketplace or the audience.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? You know, that was a little short 1-minute video of George Harrison talking about, you know, aging and stereotypical things and things to that nature. But man, there was a lot included in what he just said. And so anyhow, y'all, with all that said, it made me think about how fast time goes by. Like the way he said it, from 17 to, what did he say, 57 goes by like that. And I think age is all about a mindset, you know, and I've said it on here before. I'll say it again. God, I hope I never become one of them fucking crotchety old bitter Kens or Karens. And I don't mean that with no disrespect to people with those names, but you know what I'm talking about, man. God, I never want to become a bitter old man or a cranky ass, crotchety old man. You know, I hope I can stay my crazy self and like I just said, refuse to grow up until my time comes, you know, because age really is all about a mindset, you know. So, yeah, anyhow, with all that said, y'all enjoy the moments. So, anyhow, we're going to shift gears again. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my struggles, y'all. I talked a little bit earlier in this podcast about alcohol and drinking. And I've even mentioned, not just on this episode of the show, but previous ones, how this past year of doing this podcast into episode 51, just one more live show to go before we take a breather and then come back with the Dare Me 2.0 version, which will be recorded versions of the show. Anyway, I talked about how this has been part of my healing process. Without going too deep into my story again, y'all, you know, what happened to me this last time around is I got hooked on opioid pain medication when I broke my ankle, and I was sick. I had a little cancer scare. Call it a little one. I don't think there's such thing as a little cancer scare, but yeah, man, I had bladder cancer. Good Lord willing, it'll be 6 years next month in April since I had the surgery. They took out about a golf ball sized tumor. Thank God I didn't have to do radiation treatment, but I did do 6 months of chemo. God blessed, you know, all the folks who have dealt with that kind of cancer. It's no fun, I can tell you that, like any kind of cancer. The thing of it is, though, you know, good Lord willing, I'll be 6 years cancer free since the surgery and the chemo treatment in April. And during that whole struggle, I was prescribed a lot of opioid pain medication. I went through them all, y'all, not to do a drug-a-log, but, you know, fucking all of them. You know, started off with the Vicodins, Norcos, whatever you want to call it, you know, went from, because they have generic versions of it with these different names, you know, Percocets, oxycodone, Oxycontin, Dilaudid, Demerol, and at the end, as I've talked about on this podcast many times, y'all, snorting fucking heroin. Who would have thought? I still can't believe it when I think about it sometimes, that a guy like me, with all my knowledge and wisdom, you know, and years of recovery and Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous programs and other recovery groups and treatment centers and rehabs I've been in and struggles since I was a kid, 10, 11, 12 years old, and long term, not just clean time, because there's some smart ass motherfucker in one of these 12-step rooms will say, well, yeah, he had clean time, but he didn't have recovery. Fuck you. I had clean time and recovery, practice the 12 steps and the literature and the way of life. It's a way of life. But what happens is, like I've said earlier on this podcast, it's a mental sickness too. Sometimes we get a little bit too big for our own britches. Hello, I know, because it happened to me. Thought I had that shit all figured out. I thought I had it kicked. Oh my God. I'd never thought in a million years I would relapse after having almost 17 years clean, relapsing for 5, clean for over 6 again, and relapsed again. Not trying to make excuses, y'all. I'll also say, like I just described, I went through the health struggle. I broke my ankle. The doctor's surgeon prescribed it for me. I justified it in my mind. There's a place in the NA basic text that talks about in times of illness. But I didn't do it properly. I didn't tell anyone in the program or people in my life. I kept it on the DL, sneaky sneak, And then after a while, running around thinking I was tricking everybody when the only one I was tricking was my damn self. And that turned into a 9-year addiction to opiates, y'all. Yeah, I was one of them functioning addicts, I was a functioning addict. Got up and went to work every day all them years, at them last couple years. And then the COVID pandemic hit, where we were all locked down, isolating in our houses and shit. And I tried kicking, man, and then I picked the bottle up again. Holy cow. So now, and by the way, here I'm prescribed Xanax, which is a benzo, dangerous drug. Basically, if you know, it's alcohol in pill form. And I'm hooked on Adderall because that shit would have me so wiped out, the opiates and the benzos and the booze, and the Adderall would give me the pick me up. I remember a buddy of mine telling me, God damn, Glenn, that's some fucking Elvis shit. You're going to die. No disrespect to Elvis, but we all know that's what Elvis was doing and what was going on with him, at least from what we've been told and heard. He was taking speeders to keep going all day, every day, doing all them shows, and downs to try to get sleep at night. And that's exactly what happened to me, man. It's like this fucking vicious circle. You become like a trash can, and you're sick thinking, if you're truly an addict and a real one, justifies doing all that shit. And I remember even, I've said, oh, well, at least I never picked up a needle, and people tell me, yeah, yet go back to that shit. See how long that lasts, because there are people that would think like, God damn, bro, what the fuck are you snorting that shit for? You're wasting it. You might as well run it, and I just always had this fear, healthy fear, of ever using needles. And well, but man, that would have been next for me and could be next if I ever went back to it. So I have a healthy fear, y'all. But anyway, where I'm going with that whole thing, I kind of gave you a quick rundown, Reader's Digest version of my story. Believe me, there's a lot more to it than that. But where I think I was going with that, because I'm going to show you a couple videos here in a second, just short little video clips about where I'm at in my life right now as we bring this podcast to a close soon with just one more episode and going the full circle of 1 year. During that COVID pandemic, when everybody was locked down and isolating at home, I thought, man, I ought to take advantage of this time. So I thought, to try to kick these fucking opiates that I've been taking for 8-9 years at the time. This is a perfect opportunity. I don't have to get up and go into the office, go to work every day. Everybody's locked down at home and shit. This is my opportunity to do it. And I just couldn't seem to get through all the horrible, horrible withdrawal symptoms. Now, there may be people who might say, it wasn't that bad. Well, what I've learned is, it was, first of all, for me, it was the worst fucking thing I've ever been through in my life. I have come to the conclusion that opiate withdrawal symptoms are different for each person. And I think one of the big things that affects that is, first of all, how long you've been using opiates and how much you've been using on a daily basis over the course of all that time. Well, y'all, I gave you the rundown of all the different ones I was using. And at the end, using heroin, and for how long? 9 fucking years. So, yeah, for me, y'all, God forbid if I ever relapsed on opiates and went back to using right out of the gate what I was using at the end, I'd be dead like that, because you build up this tolerance, man. You build up a tolerance. I could never go back to using that much, if I did relapse, God forbid. Anyhow, where I'm going with this, y'all, is during that time when I was trying to kick, and believe me, the withdrawal symptoms, if they're fucking horrible. You feel like you want to die. I ain't going to go through all of them. I've talked about them many times on this podcast. Anything you've heard about going through opiate withdrawals, multiply that by 10, and you'd be maybe getting close, for how it felt for me. So where I'm going with that is I somehow justified in my mind with my sick thinking, my addictive thinking, that picking up the bottle and starting to drink alcohol again might be a good idea. Oh, Jesus. Thank God I can laugh about it now because it ain't fucking funny. I had been sober for years, even through my opiate addiction, because alcohol, oh my God, I talked about it on this podcast, how it's such a horrible, horrible addiction, something to become physically dependent on, where you wake up with the shakes and got to force it down and all that shit. I went through treatment just to get off of alcohol. Very dangerous withdrawals, by the way, from alcohol. That's one that you're probably better off trying to kick in a medically supervised environment. Don't recommend trying to kick that one at home and on your own if you truly are physically addicted. It's very dangerous. Nonetheless, I somehow justified in my mind that, drinking might help take the edge off the opiate withdrawals, help me to get through it. And then once I get off the opiates, I'll wean down off the booze and get off of that. How fucked up is that thinking? That's how it got for me, man. And so I started drinking again. And obviously, if you haven't figured out from the way I'm describing it, it didn't work. Now all of a sudden I developed 2 habits, and it didn't take long at all. Within a month, I was back to drinking a pint to a fifth of JMO a day, not to mention however many fucking beers I'd drink throughout the day from the time I got up to the time I went to sleep or more. And then the blackouts came again, humiliating experiences with close friends and people I love in my life that I had to fucking try to explain. I've showed pictures on this podcast of me all beaten up, where I woke up from a blackout, looked in the mirror, and didn't even know what fucking happened to me. Holy fuck. And so anyhow, where I'm going with all that, y'all, is, as I've said on this podcast, even as recent as tonight and times before, I had some good times. I did. I truly did. And my sick, addictive thinking will still romance those good times. They were good times until they weren't anymore, because I crossed that line. And if you're somebody like me who's a real one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're somebody who maybe came across this podcast and we got your interest and you're still following along and maybe even wanting to get some help or thinking about kicking or getting clean or getting sober, whatever the fuck, you know what I'm talking about. Once you cross that line, there ain't no turning back. The good times are pretty much gone. But we still romance those good times. We romance those euphoric feelings we get when we first start to drink each time. We take a couple of drinks. Fuck, it feels good. Let's call it like it is. It makes you feel good. It gives you a euphoric feeling. You feel happy, whatever the fuck. But that's very fleeting and doesn't last very long the more your addiction rolls on. And then all of a sudden, especially with alcohol, which is a depressant, it's a depressant drug. Yeah, so it makes you feel good initially, but then you start getting all fucking depressed and bummed and overanalyzing shit. And some people get angry and oh, God, it's such a sloppy drug. Anyway, where I'm going with all of this, y'all, is kind of a long lead up to these two video clips, is that this podcast has, in fact, been part of the healing process for me. And it's helped me to be accountable this past year because every fucking Sunday, I know, man, when that light goes on and this mic is hot, I got to be on and do my thing and talk about it. And man, yeah, in that reel we played at the beginning, it's like I need a breather, and it's like, oh God, it's been a year and I don't want to go, but I don't want to stay, because I need my freedom back with my Sundays and all that. And I'm talking about this openly on the podcast here tonight. I talked about it openly at a meeting Friday night and a couple meetings recently. That, man, please don't hesitate, if you know me personally, to check in with your old pal Glenn Victor and make sure I'm okay. I ain't getting high today, y'all. That is the last fucking thing on my mind. I will tell you that I still romance drinking sometimes. I had good times. I was a bar drinker. I worked in bars for half my life in clubs. I like drinking at home. I like drinking alone. There's that scene from that one movie, the movie about the boxer, where that actor Forrest Whitaker's sitting at the bar drinking all by himself, and fucking, I think it was Wahlberg walks in and he says, "Hey man, don't interrupt me. Don't you see I'm here drinking?" And then he says, "Drinking is a solitary sport." So yeah, I've been both way. I love drinking in a social environment and party and I was having all that stuff, and also like drinking alone too, so I miss that shit sometimes. I'm not gonna fucking sit here and lie about it. Yeah, I'm coming up on 3 years clean and sober a week from tomorrow. Next week on the podcast, we'll be celebrating live from Honolulu, Hawaii, 1 year of this podcast and your old pal Glenn having 3 years clean and sober. And I still will romance drinking sometimes. And I still miss the good times sometimes. Even when it comes to using and stuff, I think to myself, well, yeah, man, that shit gives you this exaggerated sense of well being. It makes you feel good. Who the fuck wouldn't want to feel good all the time? The thing I got to remember is it doesn't make you feel good all the time. It works until it doesn't. There were good times until there weren't anymore. And I got to remember that, man. Please pray for your old pal Glenn that I don't forget that again, because as I've said, I've had those couple of relapses. So anyhow, I'm going to play a couple quick video clips. One of them is from somebody who's long been passed away. And for our younger people, if you're watching or listening to this, you may not even know who this guy is. But he was an idol of mine when I was growing up as a kid. He was a member of the Rat Pack. And if you don't know who the Rat Pack is, it was this group of singers that were real famous and, big in Vegas, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Joey Bishop, and this guy, Sammy Davis Jr. They all became like alcoholics, and used dope and all that other stuff. It all came out in the end, you know what I mean? They all had stories to tell and everything like that. Well, Sammy Davis got clean and sober before he passed away. And he did an interview on a talk show that a lot of you will remember, the Arsenio Hall show. And Arsenio was talking to him about the old times and, the party life and all that other stuff. And so I just thought, based on everything I just described with my personal experience, that we'd show this because, man, some of what he talks about here, I can relate Wondering if maybe any of y'all can too, if you're a real one like me. Check it out.
How much of drug use was because it was a way of socializing and attracting friends?
It wasn't any of those things with
Really?
me, Arsenio. I did it because, first of all, I'm still waiting to get high.
Mm-hmm.
That's the God's honest truth. I'm still
Yeah.
waiting to get high.
Just didn't happen for you.
It didn't happen for me. And now, booze. Ooh, booze? I love booze. You understand me? And they're all, you abuse anything. But drugs was just something because it seemed to be, everybody was doing it and I wanted to be with everybody. But man, to really get a nice buzz, give me a little bourbon, give me a little vodka. I miss booze. See, I don't miss the other stuff, but I miss not drinking.
And why did you stop drinking?
Because the doctor said you gonna die. You will die.
Yeah, hello. Yep, that's what they told me too. So yeah, man, I just thought we'd share that for a friendly reminder to anybody who could relate that may be watching or listening, and also a friendly reminder to yours truly, to myself, and I like that video because it also tells me I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that, like Sammy just said, misses booze. Oh God, I hope this ain't a trigger to nobody, but there are days when I sure do miss a good shot of fucking JMO. Miss a good vodka and tonic or whatever the fuck. Oh my God, some days I miss it, man. Oh God, some days I just want to sit down and take the fucking edge off. But thank God I still remember that old saying, man. It ain't the last one that'll kill me, it's the first one. I have shared, I've fucking tattooed on my arm. That one says one away forever. And it's right there on my fucking arm as a constant reminder to me every day. It ain't the last one that'll kill me. It's the first one. If I take one, that's it. Guys like me, if you're a real one, once it goes in my body, all bets are off. Don't know why, but once people like me that are real ones cross that line, we put one in the body, we go till the wheels fall off. There were times when I could control it. There were times when I drank like a gentleman. I could probably drink like a gentleman tonight and for the next few days and next few weeks. But if I start, it's just a matter of time before I go back to being a fallen down drunk all over again, having a fucking drink all day, every day, waking up in the morning with them fucking shakes again. And you know what? Oh man, that was something else I thought we'd talk about at some point on this podcast that we just never got to, and I'm going to really try to get to it on the Dare Me 2.0 version, is some of my family history. Going back to a previous generation, every family, every ethnicity, sometimes we like to wear that shit on our shoulder like a badge, like, well, we were the real ones, man. We love to party, I come from the hood, or, I'm an Italian, we really like to party, or I'm Puerto Rican, we fucking party, man, or, in my case, us fucking Polacks, we love to fucking party, or whatever the fuck, and it's like, it don't matter. I don't give a fuck what nationality you are, what race you are, what gender you are, what age you are. It don't fucking matter, man. We all love to party, and every family's got its story and its histories. I will tell you, in a previous generation of my family, and my dad, may he rest in peace, he had four brothers and a couple of sisters, and man, just God, it's fucking horrible when I think about it, man, without going into a lot of detail. Like I said, maybe I'll talk about it on a podcast down the road. Wiped out a whole family, man, and I got to remember that. For me, that's part of the reason I think I bring that up, man, is, God damn, man. I was just as bad, if not worse, for some fucking reason. I've been able to get clean and sober again, not once, not twice, but now for the third time in my life. And I really, truly hope that I never go back to that again. And so, with all that said, y'all, yeah, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the booze because, yeah, man, I've really had a focus on this podcast about the opiates because that's what got me this last time around. And that addiction to opiates is what prompted me to do this podcast. But oh boy, I got to sure fucking remember that addiction to the booze too, because that shit fucking almost killed me. And so I'm going to show one more video clip and then we're going to bring this show to a close, y'all. I've talked a lot on this program about 12-step groups and, Narcotics Anonymous, NA, Alcoholics Anonymous, AA. I've said many times, and I'll say it again. I ain't trying to fucking cram that down nobody's throat. I ain't no representative or none of that other shit. I'm just another guy trying to stay clean and trying to stay sober. And yeah, one day longer. And there's some people, if you're a program guru, like, well, that motherfucker's using mixed language, clean and sober. Fuck all that shit, whatever. Do you? I get it. And drugs and drugs and drug and clean and, mixed message and all that other shit. For people who don't know, that just confuses them. Okay. So yeah, man, I'm fucking living clean and sober again. And, I've said on here many times, although I'm not a representative, I'm an NA guy. That's the program I choose to go to. But I also have said on here, I go to AA meetings and I've been to more AA meetings than I could possibly remember. And I can relate. It's basically the same 12 steps, y'all. When I go to a AA meeting now, I kind of feel like I'm visiting family. I respect the singleness of purpose in AA. It's all about alcohol. And won't go there and say, well, I'm an alcoholic and an addict, to try to get attention or be that rebel and I'll show these motherfuckers. And fuck all that. If you go, have respect for their singleness of purpose. And if there's people in there on the marijuana maintenance program that smoke weed instead of drinking, don't fucking judge them. More power to them. I talked a little bit about some of my family that ain't no longer with us. God, I wish some of them guys could have switched from drinking to smoking weed. They would have lived 20 years longer. So, man, be careful when you go judging people like that. Anyhow, for me, though, I live 100% clean and sober. And like I've said on here many times, when I go to NA meetings, then I'm home. That I feel right at home. That's where I belong. And I've been going to NA meetings since 1986, y'all. Holy fuck. That does make me feel old. But anyhow, where I'm going with that, leading up to this next video clip, that's just me, y'all. That's me. Okay. 12-step meetings and groups have been a big part of my recovery. Because I make that distinction, as I've talked about on this podcast many times. I have my program and then I have my recovery. Two different things to me, y'all. And for anybody who may be new, trying to get on that path of living clean and sober, I ain't telling you how to do it. Do you, boo? What I'll share as my experience is recovery needs to involve a lot more than just going to fucking 12-step meetings. And when you go to them 12-step meetings, it ain't like I like to say, they sprinkle some pixie dust on you and all of a sudden everything's okay and you're happy, joyous, and free. Wish it was that fucking easy. It ain't. There's work to be done and you got to want it. Can't do it for the courts. Can't do it for your old lady. Can't do it for your old man. Can't do it for your kids. Can't do it for the money. Can't do it for your job. You got to fucking want it for you. And if you don't, you kind of sort of wasting your time, not to mention the time of others as well. You got to want it. But if you truly want it, you can do it. I have seen people turn their lives around. I never thought in a million years would have been able to do it. Just goes to show I don't know it all. If you ever hear me say I know it all, then you really know I'm full of shit. I have truly been amazed at the way some people I've met in my life have turned their life around. People I never thought would be able to get clean or ever able to get sober or clean or sober, whatever the fuck you want to call it, and now are living that life clean and sober and have peace. So, yeah, man, don't ever give up on anybody. What I'll also say is that there's work to be done. And the 12-step meetings are not just some silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. And so, where I'm going with that is, yeah, my recommendation, for whatever it's worth, with my humble little ass, is 12-step meetings can be a big part of recovery. So for me, where I'm going with this all is NA is my program of choice. Just like I had a drug of choice, I got a program of choice. I can go to AA, I can go to GA, I can go to OA, whatever, fucking A. You know, they're all the same 12 steps, and adapt and respect their singleness of purpose. For me, I'm an addict. I'm addicted to all that shit, you know. So when I talk about, you know, addiction, it's all inclusive. And that's basically at the end of the day what the NA program's all about. It tells us in the literature, all them substances are just a symptom of the sickness of addiction, you know. I like, remember this one guy I met up in Michigan when I was kicking. I forget his name, but he used to come in and he'd say his name and he'd say, I'm addicted to more. You know, and that's me, you know. And so what I'm saying, y'all, is NA is my program. My recovery involves a lot more other stuff, and some of which have been topics of this program. Fitness, you know, exercise, going to the gym on a regular basis. Me and that boy Shivang, who called in to the podcast earlier tonight. Thank you again, Shivang, for calling in. Appreciate you, bro. We've talked about this, how we both believe that in the 12-step programs, fitness and exercise is an area that the 12-step programs fall horribly short in. You know, there's an old saying, a lot of people come in, put down the spoon and pick up the fork. Hello, I know, because it happened to me. Go back to the Dare Me Podcast YouTube channel, click on the videos tab, scroll through them 50 episodes, and find one that says Get Fit with G and me. We did a whole episode with my son G, who coached me back to good physical health, where we talk about how I ballooned up, y'all. We showed before and after pictures. There's a whole reel of my journey of getting fit again, because when I started getting clean, man, I just started eating like fucking crazy and got addicted to sugar again and all that other stuff. And so the point I'm making is, without getting too far off topic, man, getting fit and going to the gym on a regular basis is huge in recovery. If you truly want to turn your physical health around, especially, man, I'll say if you're kicking opiates, I know one of the huge side effects in the beginning is you got no energy. I mean, zero. It's zapped. Can't even get out of bed to go to the bathroom sometimes, you know. It's that bad. And the last thing you can possibly imagine yourself doing is exercising or going to the gym or something like that. Well, get through that first week. You know, it's the hell week. Like when you join a fraternity and they have hell week. That's what it's like going through fucking opiate withdrawals. It's a living hell. Once you get through that, man, just do whatever you can to push yourself to start exercising. Maybe start small, man. Just go walk around the fucking block of whatever, and then eventually get to the gym. And oh God, it makes such a huge world of difference. Gets the endorphins flowing in the brain, gets the dopamine flowing, gets the adrenaline flowing, gives you more energy. I just can't recommend it enough. So anyhow, yeah. And then, as we've talked about on this podcast, man, enlightenment, you know, you got to work on your peace, you know. They say that addiction, alcoholism is a 3-pronged sickness, like we mentioned earlier on this podcast. It is physical, it's mental, and it's spiritual. So, yeah, whatever you got to do to work on your peace, I ain't talking about no fucking religion. None of them programs are religious. Some people mistakenly think they are. You know, I've heard stories where somebody, I think it was somebody just bullshitting as a way to cop out of going to meetings, told another person, oh, yeah, they were out there handing out fucking Bibles afterwards. Well, if I ever saw somebody handing out Bibles after a NA or AA meeting, I'd be shocked, because they'd run that motherfucker out of town so fast his head would spin. That don't go on in no fucking 12-step meetings. It doesn't, you know, and that's not discouraging anybody from pursuing religion. If that's what they choose to do, more power to you. Do you, boo? You know, it ain't a religious program, though, you know, and there ain't no single religion that's discussed, talked about, whatever. It's all about spirituality, trying to find your peace. And, you know, I don't want to go into that long topic right now, but if you may want more information on that and you're still hanging with us, I see we still got people in the viewing room. Hey, shout out to y'all for hanging tough with us. And anybody who comes across the recorded version of this particular show, go to that Dare Me Podcast YouTube channel, click on the videos tab, and scroll all the way down and look for the one that says the God thing. We did a whole episode all about enlightenment, spirituality, and we had not one, not two, but 3 guests on that show. We had Shebang, who called in earlier tonight. We had that girl Melissa Dawn, who's been a guest on the podcast a couple times. We've had social media activist Steve Lawrence was on that show, and all 4 of us talked about spirituality and enlightenment together. If you're working on trying to have and maintain some peace in your life as you go through this transition from living a life as an active addict, alcoholic, whatever the fuck you want to call it, to living clean and sober, it's a hell of a transition. Oh my God, you go through so many changes physically, mentally, and spiritually. That episode, I think, would really be beneficial to you if you're a person going through that. So, yeah, man, anyhow, with all that said, what I'll also say is, although the 12-step programs have been a huge part of my recovery and continue to be, I just love the community. It ain't for everybody. You don't have to do NA to get clean and sober and live clean and sober. You don't have to do AA to get and live clean and sober. There's a lot of other options out there. In fact, on that episode, I just talked about the God thing. We talk about some of the other ones. There's the Dharma program. Some people do turn to religion. They find God. Others turn to the gym and get physically fit there. Whatever you got to do to get clean and sober and stay and live clean and sober. And so anyway, with all that said, if you're a person who've decided the 12-step programs just ain't for you, don't give up. That don't mean you can't live clean and sober. There's all kinds of other ways. Remember what I said, for me, I have my program and I have my recovery. You know, there's people who live clean and sober and never been to a 12-step meeting, or have gone but just don't like it. That's not them. And so anyway, I keep dancing around this video. It's just a short video clip, y'all, but I thought it was a good one that we'd show today as a reminder to yours truly, as I'm about to sign off this edition of the podcast and the whole first season, Dare Me 1.0, after next week. This was a good reminder to me that when I start to romance drinking, like what I just talked about in this last 15 minutes I've been yapping here or whatever the fuck about this topic, this is a good reminder to me, as he says in here, that if I start thinking it's a good idea, I need to go back to the drawing board and start weighing them fucking pros and cons again. So this is a singer and guitar player that most everyone will all know, John Mayer, who lives clean and sober now. Love John Mayer. Anyway, this is just a clip from an interview he did about living clean and sober. So let's check it out, and then we'll talk about it and wrap this show up.
You haven't had a drink for 2 years, 3 years?
3 years, over 3 years, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I always tell myself now, and it wasn't an AA thing. I managed to find a way to have it make sense on my own. But I always tell myself now, like, if you think about doing it again, you've just tallied up the pros and cons wrong. Do it again.
Right.
You know, it's just for me. I mean, you could see on the chart where when I stopped, my productivity just went through the roof. I can do anything at any time of day. You know, when you stop drinking, you'll be on a treadmill at like 1 a.m. being like, this is amazing.
Yeah, that's me, yours truly. For anyone who follows me on social media, you know I'm a night person, and I check in at the gym a lot, or I'll post shit while I'm there working out overnight at 1 a.m. on the treadmill. It's amazing. So anyway, though, y'all, I like that clip from that boy John Mayer, who's in that clip been clean and sober over 3 years. I'm not sure how much time he has now, but here I am coming up on 3 years again, 1 week from tomorrow. And I thought that was a great clip to show as a reminder to not just anyone watching or listening, but to yours truly too, that when I do start romancing, which I still do sometimes, drinking and missing those good times, because there were good times until there weren't anymore. When I start missing that euphoric feeling that Sammy Davis talked about in his little short video clip, that taking the edge off, that buzz from the shot of bourbon or the shot of vodka or whatever, I got to remember that that's fleeting and it only lasts for so long. And then before you know it, guys like me go till the wheels fall off, and then I'm waking up with the shakes. I got to remember, as I've said earlier, to play that tape all the way through. So I really liked what John Mayer said in that clip, man. Well, my sick thinking, my addict thinking kicks in, and I start thinking that drinking is a good idea. I need to go back and weigh all them pros and cons, man, and remember that it's not a good idea. So with all that said, y'all, like I said earlier, if you know me or you come across this podcast, by all means, feel free to check in with your old pal Glenn Victor anytime. You can send me a DM, a text, a call, whatever, and help keep my sick ass accountable, because, yeah, man, I do still romance it sometimes, the drinking. Kind of like Sammy Davis said, I don't miss all that other shit. I really don't. Oh, God, I don't miss the chase of the dope and being sick and all that other shit. Sometimes, though, man, oh God, having a few drinks or a few beers sounds attractive. And holy cow, I hope I never pick that shit up again, because I don't want to go back down that fucking road again. That's just me being honest, y'all. That's just me being honest. There's some fucking smart ass in the program. He'll say, well, there's something missing in this program. He needs to go back and work the first step over, or some fucking shit. Fuck you, do you, boo. This is me doing me. And one of the ways I do it and help keep myself accountable is by talking about it, you know. And that's what we do at meetings sometimes, you know. If you've never been, you know, we talk about it like, God damn, man. And thank God I've had people who've been around the block in the program that I do look up to and respect and admire, who will say to me, Glenn, it's normal for an addict to think about using. It's normal for an alcoholic to think about drinking. Don't beat yourself up too bad, but do what you're doing. Talk openly about it. Consult with people. Don't try to be sneak on the DL like I did with them fucking pills, and then at the end run around thinking I'm tricking everybody when the only one I was tricking was myself. So that's me being honest, y'all. And but I ain't getting high today. I definitely ain't getting loaded today, you know. So thank you to all the people who have checked in with me and sent their well wishes over the course of this past year. Oh my God, I'm so forever grateful. A lot of those messages, DMs, texts, and everything we've shared on this program with the approval of some of the people that have sent me them, that I talked to, you know. And so, yeah, if you go back and watch previous episodes, they're all mixed throughout of them, different people we've heard from. And I'm forever grateful for all the encouragement that everyone's given me. So with all that said, y'all, we're going to wrap up this edition of the show. And just a friendly reminder, we will be live one more time next week. Will be episode 52 of the Dare Me podcast. Dare Me 1.0. 52 weeks in a row. One full year. Oh my God. Whoo. I am trying not to get filled up, y'all, because I will say, I try not to toot my own horn, but I'm so fucking proud of myself. I'm proud of us, Dean, and everybody else that's participated in this podcast that, man, made a commitment even before we started this thing that if we were going to do it, we're going to do it for one full year, or what's the point, and started it with the hope that we might help even one person, and we have, including yours truly. Like I've said, y'all, in this last half hour, I've been running my mouth that this has helped keep me accountable. It's been part of my healing process. So, even if that one person that helped was just me, it's all been worth it. You know what I mean? But we're going to do it one more time, and then we're going to take a breather. And don't even have a set time frame on when we're going to come back, but we'll be back with the Dare Me 2.0 version of this podcast, and they'll be recorded versions, and we're really going to do our best to keep them to an hour long, like I said, in a nice little package with a pretty little bow, and kind of level up with the podcast, take it to the next level. And more to come on all that. But in the meantime, and in between your toes, I thought we'd wrap it up with this nice slide, because that will be yours truly next week. I leave on Tuesday, and I arrive in Honolulu at 12:30 in the afternoon on Tuesday, and I'll be there for a whole week till the following Tuesday, and I will celebrate 3 years clean and sober, the good Lord willing, y'all. 1 week from tomorrow. And we will celebrate 1 full year of the Dare Me podcast 1 week from tonight. And I have the pleasure and the honor of doing it together with my best friend in the world and my son, Glenn Jr. G Money, who has been on this podcast many times, and it just worked out this way. That's where Glenn lives now. He's been living there for a couple of months with his beautiful wife, Awana, and I'm so blessed, y'all, that I get to go there and visit, spend a week there, and celebrate those milestones with him there. And I get emotional in part, y'all, because just 3 short years ago, as I've shared on this podcast many, many times, I felt like I wanted to die. I was so hopelessly in the grips of addiction, and addicted to those pills, addicted to the booze again, all the trials and tribulations I've talked about on this podcast, not saying my war stories are any worse or any better than anybody else. I'm just another guy, sometimes I think about that like, goddamn, I ain't so fucking special, man. There's so many people that have struggled with this, going back to guys like Sammy Davis, John Mayer, and every other buddy. I sometimes think, some of the people from my old professional life or even personal life probably think like, oh, big deal, another fucking druggie gets clean, Glenn, you ain't that special. And I get all that. I get it. I'll also say, though, y'all, it's a big deal to me. Those are big milestones for me that I'm coming up on next weekend. And for those of y'all that have been along for even part of the ride, thank you again so much for your support, your encouragement. I just love y'all to death. And so me and Glenn are fans of Snoopy and Woodstock. In fact, if you look close, I don't know if you can see it there, I have a Snoopy and Woodstock tattoo on my arm. And when Glenn was a little one, I got that tattoo, and I told him, hey, man, I'm Snoopy, you're Woodstock. You'll always be right there with me, right on my arm. And so he sent me a DM of this a few days ago, and so I captured it, and I said, man, I got to show that on the podcast, because there we will be drinking a mocktail Well, G might have a real one, he's not an addict like me, you know what I mean? And by the way, that's something, man, I appreciate when I'm around people who do like to have a drink every once in a while. Oh God, I love it when they do, and not be fucking condescending or patronize me. Do you, boo? You want to have a drink? I mean, I don't recommend being around that shit when you first start getting clean and sober, but when you've been clean and sober for a while, it's like if somebody wants to have a drink or two, hey, do you, man? But that's me. I've talked even about the NA beers and the mocktails on this show before. I ain't going to get too far down that road, but the point I'm making is that'll be me and G sitting on the beach here. And we're going to do the podcast live from Honolulu, Hawaii, 1 week from tonight, and bring this whole thing to a close. So anyhow, with all that said, Dean Baker has been patiently standing by live in Orlando, Florida, on the East Coast of the United States. I'm coming to you live right here in Sacramento, California, on the West Coast. And Dean, I just want to say, man, one more time, as always, you've been a rock star. Appreciate everything you do and have done for this podcast. Anything you want to add before we wrap it up tonight?
Well, wish I were going to Hawaii, but I will hold down the fort here.
Yeah, well, hey, bro, you are living in my other favorite place in the world, and that is the state of Florida, and you got Bike Week going on, so I hope you get a chance to go over there and participate in some of the festivities going on for the rest of the week and next weekend and all, and maybe we can talk to you more about it when we do the podcast next Sunday, all right?
Okay.
All right. Well, with all that said, y'all, we've developed this habit, if you will, of wrapping the show up with an old saying that I was told was attributed to Winston Churchill. And he used to tell it to the troops when they were going through battle in war. And he would say, if you're going through hell, keep fucking going. And I have always loved that quote, and I've been using it at the end of this show pretty much for the whole year in a different context. Again, if you're a person struggling with addiction and you came across our show, maybe you were looking for information on Google or YouTube, just like I was, how to get through opiate withdrawals, how to kick opiates, how to get off booze, whatever. And you came across our podcast and you rode along with us on this whole episode or any other. I'll say the same thing to you. If a guy like me can get clean and sober, you can too. If others that have participated in this podcast can do it, you can too. Don't give up. Just keep quit until you quit for good. And as that saying goes, especially if it comes to withdrawals from opiates or alcohol or any other damn thing, if you're going through hell, keep fucking going. You will come out the other side if you're just committed and make your mind up to do it. And we sincerely hope that we have been some kind of resource with this podcast in helping to kill some time, if nothing else, while you're going through the withdrawals and transitioning, like I've said, from that life of living an active addiction to living clean and sober with some peace in your life. So with all that said, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up now. We'll catch you next week for the final episode of the Dare Me podcast, the final episode of Dare Me 1.0, live from Honolulu, Hawaii next week, celebrating the end of this podcast before we start Dare Me 2.0 down the road a little bit, celebrating 3 years clean and sober for yours truly, celebrating that we'll go back on daylight saving time and all the other stuff we talked about tonight, y'all. So yeah, if you can, we hope maybe you'll tune in live next week. I anticipate we might have a couple of callers, maybe even a couple of surprise guests, being that it'll be our very last edition of the Dare Me podcast for this first year that we did it. 52 weeks in a row, y'all. So anyhow, with all that said, hope you have a safe week. Hang tough. stuff, y'all. Dean, thanks again for all your help with the podcast. We really appreciate everything you're doing to hold it down there in Orlando, Florida. We'll talk to you next week as well. And with all that said, y'all, have a great week. We'll see you next time on the Dare Me podcast. So long.